And from what I hear, their background, where my dad, was born in an hacienda there in Jimenez, and my mother was also, she was born there in Parral. And my dad and my mother, when they came to El Paso, Texas, when they were pretty young, because my mother was born in 1889 and my dad was born in 1890. And when they met there in El Paso, because my mother, to begin with, I don't know what year my dad came, but my mother, she came not to California, but to El Paso, Texas, when she was, I would say about 11 or 12 years old, around the turn of the century, around 1900. And she started to work at the Acme Laundry, which it was over there on the north of the railroad tracks of the Southern Pacific. And my dad worked for the railroad, the Southern Pacific Railroad, and before that, though, when he first started working for the railroad, he worked for the Texas Pacific, which that doesn't exist anymore. But he was a machinist for the railroad. And they met, and that's when the whole picture started. As far as what their youth was like, I can only have stories that my mother related to us.
What made them move north? Why did they want to cross the line?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, what makes them cross the line now? I mean, that is something that we don't know. I mean, there's always been immigration coming to this country from Mexico since, to begin with, this used to be Mexico territory. Right. And so way back there in the late 1800s and around the turn of the century, that immigration was quite a prevalent thing, because even in New York, when the people were coming from Europe, they were coming through Ellis Island, and they used to come to this country. So when my parents came to this country, I don't ever recall my mother or my dad mentioning actually what motivated them to come to this country. But
your father was a matador?
Well,
so how did that happen?
Well, it's a funny thing, because when I was born in 1923, he was already bullfighting. I don't recall exactly when he started, but he used to work for the railroad during the week, and on Sunday afternoons he used to go to Juarez and do the bullfighting. And he loved the bulls, and imagine the thrill of really getting into the arena. And that's the reason my name is Rodolfo, Rudy in English, but Rodolfo is the name that he named me, because at that time there was a famous Mexican bullfighter in Mexico. His name was Rodolfo Gaona, and he named me after him because he said that I was going to be, a bullfighter when I grew up. Instead, he was a bullfighter and I was a bullshitter, but that's the way it goes, Anyway, so that's the way he started. And since he was, when he had some half-sisters that he had never met, when he was growing up, until later on came to pass that he found out he had a bunch of family, half-sisters and half-brothers that were born in Mexico while he was here in El Paso, Texas. So when he was bullfighting, all the half-sisters, they used to go to the bullfights, and, well, you've seen movies about what the matadores do and how they have parties afterwards, and, and they have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
At the time, my oldest sister, when she was 13 or 14 years old, her name is Consuelo, she used to go to the parties, and my half-sisters would, go and take her, and this created a lot of friction between my mother and my dad, because my dad was spending a lot of time with that part of the family, and, well, of course, he was in his glory, bullfighting and all the attention they get, and there were several locations there where I remember this thing I remember, I must have been about 4 or 5 years old, that he came home, and where we used to live, I used to sleep on the ground. My mother used to have a mattress that she put up there because there were so many in the family. There were 7 of us. I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. And in the living room, my mother would put a mattress, and I used to sleep there, and my dad, when he used to come in, he would sleep on the same mattress there with me. Anyway, that night that he came in, after one of the bullfights, he really got high, and when he got home, he almost stepped on me. And my mother made a big stink about it. And the next day, I remember him opening his arms. You know, all he had was one of those undershirt that they used to wear then, you know, sleeveless, the one they used to wear. And when he opened his arms and saw under his armpits, they were all bruised. And what had happened is that the bull zigged when he should have zagged, and he caught my dad, and luckily the horns didn't get him, but the horns went under his armpits and he flipped him up in the air. Wow. He came down and landed on top of the bull, and he got up, he went ahead and killed the bull. And he got a lot of exclamation over that. You know how they give you an ear or they give you a tail or whatever it is according to how well they perform. And on that performance, he got a couple of years, and they threw money into the arena, and they really got loaded. So that I remember. Now, as far as my mother had nothing extraordinary. I mean, she was just a homemaker, housewife, and because of all those parties that my dad and my mother used to have, the fighting over those parties, and my mother felt that he was preferring all the half sisters because the main matador, he's the one that picks the queen of the corrida. And he would pick one of his half sisters. And my mother was really upset because she thought that my oldest sister, because at that time she was 13 or 14, and she was kind of mature, that she should have been selected. That started a lot of friction among them. And as time went on, the real reasons why they used to fight, this is what came to light.
Interesting. Just fascinating. El Paso, was there much there back then? I mean, it must have been a speck on a map.
Well, El Paso, Texas, from my recollection, I don't know going back to when they first came to El Paso, but I know that when I was there, the population was around 60,000. That was in in the 1930s, because to begin with, how did I wind up coming to California? Well, in 1934, my mother divorced my dad, and I was 11 years old. And my dad, working for the railroad, used to get railroad passes that, the family can go anywhere they wanted to. So dating back, my mother used to get passes from him, and my mother used to come to California because she had two sisters that lived out here in California. And she would come and visit him. That was in 1920, the first time she made a trip, and I recall her telling me that when she arrived at the train station over there, and my aunt's, one of her sisters, her husband, they went and picked her up at the train station in L.A., and it was a horse and buggy situation. He used to work as a farmhand over there around the St. Gabriel Mission, and then he went on a buggy all the way to. Can you imagine how long it takes? About 20 hours. I mean, it was 20 miles, and it took quite a while to get there. And then they picked her up, and they would go take her to the house at the ranch there. Mm. And then again, the next time was in 1926, when my kid brother was born. And this I remember because I was about 3.5 years old when he was born. And there was a fire at this hotel where we were living, which was managed by one of my mother's comadres. That's the reason we were staying there. That was over there on Main Street, not far from downtown L.A. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the people that are familiar with the area, they call that area Dogtown. And they have a dog pound in there. That's the reason that name, moniker came to be, that Dogtown area.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, there's
yes.
Still an area.
Yeah, and the school is still there because in 1926, we stayed there in 1926, but only maybe a year. In 1927, we went back to Texas, and life continued there. At that time is when I remember my dad, when he came home drunk, he almost stepped on me. It was in 1927. Mm. The following year, in 1928, my kid sister was born, in September the 1st of 1928. And when she was born, I remember they ushered us out into outside the house because all of us were born at home, and midwives, there was no doctors, it was midwives. They used to deliver the kids. So in 1928, when she was born, they shoot us out about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're out there, kids playing around until the baby was born. So then, when that was in 1928, and about 6 weeks later, as soon as like they call it in Spanish, the dieta, the 40 days, Then, she got another pass from my dad, and we came to California in 1928. And we stayed here till 28, 29, and 1930, in March of 1930, we headed back to El Paso. And that's when I started having more and more memories of the town and what was there. So we stayed from 1930 until 1935, a year after my mother divorced my dad. She decided that we were not going to get anywhere working, in that town, because around that time it was right in the heart of the Depression, and things were very hard for everybody. I remember the Depression years because we used to get a lot of hobos that used to come to our backyard because we lived right next to the railroad tracks, and there was an alley right behind us and a gully, and all the railroad yards were right behind there. And all these hobos, we used to call them tramps, they used to come to the backyard and to our backyard and knock on the door. And my mother always felt sorry for them. She would make burritos with beans, I mean, well, they just loved it. And when the word gets around, you're going to get more people. And that's what used to happen. And my mother used to take some meat that she used to go shopping into Juarez because the money would go further in Juarez than buying groceries and stuff. And she would buy meat and come home and she would strip it down, and then she would prepare it and then hang it up on some high clotheslines to dry it, and they make jerky out of it.
It's incredible.
So anyway, that was basically
Why did your mother and father divorce?
For those same complications that my dad was he was hardly ever home. I don't remember my dad being at home maybe in all the years that I can remember, maybe 3 or 4 times that I have any recollection at all that he was at home. And he used to sit down and put a pillow on the ground there, and put a pillow on the ground and lay on it, and then get another pillow and put it over his face. That's the way he used to relax. And we as kids couldn't make any noise. We had to be real quiet. But usually every evening when he used to come home from work, and after dinner, he would go in and get all cleaned up, all get dressed up, and put on his suit. And he used to go to he used to call it a social club. And he used to go to that social club. That's what he used to do. And he used to go home pretty late. In other words, maybe my mother and him, had a lot of arguments over, why he was always gone from the house. But it had all started back when like I mentioned before about the bullfights and my mother seemed that he was not paying enough attention to the family.
I understand.
So they had a conflict there, like anybody else, I suppose, and so finally she just had it,
How did you land in Lincoln Heights, which was a fascinating community back then?
Well, when we came here in 1928, we lived in Avenue 18, which is in Lincoln Heights, right on the corner of Mozart and Avenue 18. There was a school that was right there, Albion Street School, in the same neighborhood right there in the same block. And on the very corner there was a market, Buongiorno. It was an Italian guy that used to run the market because the neighborhood was mostly Italian and Mexican. So we were not too far from the others, the area there. And there was like Clover Street in Lamar, which was part of the neighborhood. And when we came in 1928 and we lived there in Avenue 18, my mother made an acquaintance with a lady that used to live in the same complex. It was a duplex, and there was another one in the back. And then next to the store there, beside the Buongiornos, and there was a couple of houses, and there was a little grocery store there, little, mom and pop operation there.
Right.
And that was run by a Mexican guy. And so we used to know him, because we were right there. So that's how my mother, happened to, when we arrived there, the acquaintance that she made there. Which from there we moved to Lamar Street in 1929, which is right next to the railroad yards, the Southern Pacific Roundhouse. From there, that's when I started school, and I went to Ann Street School, which is Dogtown in a sense. And I started in the first grade in 1929. When we used to walk to the school, there was 2 ways to get there. You walk all the way to Lamar down to Main Street and all the way across the LA River and over into Ann Street, where the school was at.
You crossed the LA River?
Yeah.
It wasn't cemented then?
Oh, yeah, it was a bridge there. The bridge was there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the streetcar used to go through it.
Okay.
So then the other way was the railroad bridge that you cross across the LA River right there on Lamar. You know, it crosses the river there going into downtown LA. Because the railroad, the Southern Pacific, used to go right down Alameda Street and all the way Alameda Street, and the Southern Pacific station was on 5th and Central. Well, anyway, my mother prohibited us from, to my sister, the oldest sister, they used to, take us to school, and she said, don't cross it. She was afraid of the trains. She said, don't go through that bridge, even though there's a catwalk for the pedestrians. And once in a while we did, and she got caught, and my mother really raised hell with her. So then we always used to walk down to Main Street and a long way around to go to school. So that was in 1929, and then you got a question?
Yes, I do. Excuse me. But how did the Italians and the Mexicans get along?
Oh, it was fine. I mean, there was no animosity at all. We had a lot of friends in the neighborhood. And later on, as I come back to the story, because then we went back to Texas in 1930 and stayed there for 5 years. So then when we did leave El Paso and came back to California, of course, my mother went back to the old neighborhood. But before that, when we first got there, my mother had one of her sisters, my aunt. They lived in Delano, which is about 150 miles, on the other side of Bakersfield, and that's a farming community. And we went over there. We spent 11 days over there, but my mother could not see us living on dirt floors. And for my older brothers, they were already teenagers. For them to go out in the fields and pick cotton and all that, I mean, I said, no, that's no life for us. So we headed back to L.A. And from there, we went to this lady that my mother had met in 1928. Her name was Aurora. And through her, my mother, we went and talked to her, and we stayed in her place for a couple of days, and with other relatives of my mother that she had there. Anyway, at that point, at that junction right there in the middle of July when we came back from Delano, she met this lady, and Aurora, and she was being contracted to go pick prunes in Northern California around Gilroy. And she sold my mother the idea about going, So even before we had a home of our own, my mother talked to the contractor that had signed up this lady to, he was in charge of getting the families, to go pick the prunes. So then my mother signed up, and here we go, and then one open a flatbed truck, everybody sits on it, and going up the divide there, they call it there, on up the ridge route, through Bakersfield, through Delano, and then through Fresno, and across over into Los Baños, and over the Pacheco past the mountains, and down into near Hollister, and over into Gilroy. So then we wind up in Gilroy there, and we went in through the orchards. I can remember, I picture this like it happened yesterday. We went in into the orchard through the side, right next to an arroyo, and all the orchard of prunes, and we were out there reaching and grabbing prunes and eating them, but they were still, they weren't ripe, they were still green. So then we went in about, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of a mile or 1/4 of a mile inside the orchard, and there's where the families used to camp, right next to the arroyo and the orchards there. So we improvised and they made some lean-tos, just like you see in the islands. You get branches from the trees that you put that as a roof over your head. I had a 50-gallon drum that was cut and made into a stove where they used to cook. So then we stayed there for I think 6-7 weeks, and we used to go every morning when the fruit ripened. They had orchards all over in the surrounding areas. We used to go over towards Hollister. We used to go to the orchard where we were there, and the place where they used to go ahead and clean the prunes. Because they used to call her the dipper. Because when they get all these boxes from the field and put them on trucks and take the prunes, and they dump them all into this big tank where they wash them and clean them, and then they go through like a conveyor, and they wind up over there, and then they spread them out on 4x8 slats, and they spread them out, and then they put one on top of the other one, and they go as high as maybe 6 or 7 feet high. And then they would, on little railroad tracks, and rollers, and they would take these things, and they take them from there, and they put them in ovens, and overnight they would dry them and make prunes out of them, dry prunes out of them. So one of my brothers, Tony, he was only, at the time he was 16 actually, he got a job there working, and so they used to pay him a weekly wage. Which at that time, I mean, he used to work practically 7 days a week, and they would pay him $16 for the week. With that money, that's what my mother would buy the groceries, so that all the money that we earned from picking the prunes was being saved there. So when we got through, we would leave with some money. So at that time, when we were picking the prunes, we had to pick 40 boxes was a ton. We used to get pay $1.90 a ton. So between the family, we used to pick up 5 tons, 6 tons at the most. Because my older brother Tony wasn't doing any picking. So my other brother Bill, he used to pick with us. But my other brother George and I was 12, he was 14. We were more agile, and we used to do the majority of the picking of the prunes. We move around faster. Because my kid brother, Joe, he was only 8 years old. My kid sister was 6. So actually, we used to pick about 5 tons a day. And between George and me, we used to pick the majority. So after those 6 weeks, that's when the season ended, and you get your account settled. And my mother came when we cleared about $350 in those 6 weeks, and we came back to Los Angeles. And that's when my mother took that money, and she went and rented a house, paid the money. With that money, she paid the advance rent for 3 months. And she went out and bought us clothes, and we had a whole new wardrobe. And we started back in school. And that's the way we got our first start there back in 1935.
Wow. Was it a home or an apartment?
It was a house. It was actually a 2-bedroom house with a living room and a kitchen and a bathroom.
Nightingale Middle School.
Okay, from there, and I started school, and when I graduated from grammar school, well, I really didn't graduate because Nightingale Junior High School was being built at the time. It was in 1937, and it opened in the September of 1937. And I was in the 8th grade, and one more semester, and I would have gone straight to high school as a freshman. Instead, I was regulated to go to Nightingale. And we were the senior class there, but we were in what they call A8, the lower part, the higher part of the 8th grade, and then the 9th grade. So I went there for a year and a half, three semesters. And then we graduated from Nightingale, and that was in January of 1939.
I've written a lot about Nightingale, and Rudy, the neighborhood hasn't changed all that much, except for a Burger King here,
right?
McDonald's there. The homes look the same. The school looks the same.
Everything's the same except the population.
Yeah.
The population is what really usually ruins a neighborhood. I don't know why it went downhill as far as the population, the type of people there. Because in Lincoln Heights, as we were growing up there and going to grammar school and going to high school, the whole thing was, basically it was Italian and Mexicans going to school. Plus, we had maybe 15 or 20 Japanese. We had a couple of, Chinese. We had 2 blacks that we used to go to the school, 2 brothers. And that was it. And we had a sprinkling of Russians. They used to live over there by General Hospital, Hazard Park. They used to come to the school there. Right. So it was a mixture, but mostly, basically, it was all Italians and Mexicans.
Did you go downtown much at that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, from there we used to go to the shows downtown. We used to go down to 7th and Broadway, where you have all the big theaters that used to be down there. The Low Estate, which was
$1 Million Theater, right?
The $1 Million Theater was on 3rd and Broadway. They most of the at that time I never went to the Mexican movies. I mean, to me, it's not that I wasn't a Mexican. It's just that they didn't interest me as much as the other type of movies. We used to go to the LA Theater, the Low Estate, the Paramount, the RKO Theater, the Orpheum, where they had. I used to like to go to the Orpheum because they had stage shows.
What a memory. Wow. Okay. Did you see King Kong when it came out?
Oh, King Kong, I saw it back in Texas. That was before we came over here. Oh, yeah, the original King Kong. Oh, yes, I remember that very well. It was I still remember I could still picture that movie, It was really scary at that time, a great big giant gorilla,
It's still one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Did you go to Chinatown very much?
At that time, no, later on when I grew up, When I was, growing up, I mean, we used to go to Chinatown, but basically, my brothers and I, well, one of my brothers, Tony, him and I, we were the guys that used to go. We used to do the nightclub scene. We used to go to Olvera Street, where they had this nightclub, the Caliente, and Casa Olvera, and the Golondrina. And then right around the corner on Spring Street, we had the Bamba, which was a great place. Oh, I love that Latin music. And then right next to the Paramount Theater downstairs, there was a nightclub down there we named the Babalu. And then we used to go to down there on Sunset and Silver Lake where they have the Sarape. And that was our most of our hangout because that was a beautiful place there, the Sarape. You know, they had Latin music. We had people come from Mexico. You know, at that time there was a singer there in Mexico, Fernando Rosas, that came. You know, he used to sing, and we had those Spanish dancers, you know, on the stage show there. And
did any of the big Mexican stars come out? Maybe Pedro Infante came a little later, but did he come out?
Not Pedro Infante, Pedro Armendáriz. I met him there at the Sarape, and I'll tell you that story right now, but talking about the other one. At the Sarape there, Anthony Quinn used to go there. Cesar Romero used to go there. George Raff used to go there. They were all movie stars, you know, movie actors. And that's where they used to hang out.
They were big by then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we used to go down into Hollywood to where is now the Roosevelt Hotel. You probably hear the nightclub they have there. They have a nightclub there too, and then now it had deteriorated quite a bit. But then now they brought it back up again. They remodeled that Roosevelt Hotel, and now they have the Center Grill is the nightclub there. In fact, just this last year, you see where the movie stars were there. Anyway, we used to go there. We went to the Tropicana, all the Latin nightclubs in Hollywood. We used to rub elbow with all the movie stars.
Now, you were a teenager then?
I was about 19.
And could you drink at that time?
Oh yeah, they didn't. They never questioned that. I mean, I guess we looked old enough, you know.
Okay.
Well, we didn't drink that much, you know. We used to have, you know, the 7-Up high, you know. That's about all we used to drink.
I understand. Well, now we're moving into the time where
the war broke out.
Servicemen were getting beaten up, and did you guys know about that? And was it in the paper?
Well, yes. Actually, it was not. They made a bigger deal out of it in East LA. Now, where I lived in Lincoln Heights is not quite East LA. It's Northeast LA, you might say. And it's entirely a different neighborhood because there was so much Italian and other, you know, it was not a solid Mexican population like it was in East LA. Right. And when this things were going on with the servicemen and the Pachucos and the Zoot-Suiters that they picked on him, there was only a couple of incidents that happened. It was not like on a daily basis. It never happened that way. And we used to hear about it, but, you know, hey, nothing going on. I mean, you know, servicemen, you know, they go into a bar, and especially if they wander over into East LA and not being of their own race, you know, of course they're going to stand out. Which I have an incident on my own that I went through when I was in uniform.
What happened?
Well, when I came back from overseas, and my brother Tony and I, in Chinatown, they opened a club there, the Brazil. It was a Latin nightclub. And we went in, Tony and I, and it was on a Sunday evening, which wasn't very busy on a Sunday evening. And we sat down, and the music was playing real good. The band was about a 10-piece band. And one of the ladies that was sitting at the table, and Tony, my brother, you know, went and asked her if she wanted to dance. And she politely refused. So anyway, so we invited her to sit at our table so she wouldn't be by herself, which she did, you know, and we just having a conversation. So in the band, when had a break when they were playing, and one of the guys from the band came over, it happened to be her boyfriend. And he started insulting Tony and me. And he wanted to get into a pick a fight with Tony. At that point, the whole band came down, and they were ready to go ahead and wipe the floor with Tony and me. But I was in uniform, and thank God there were sailors and Marines and soldiers in the club there, maybe about 8 or 10 of them. And so when they saw what happened, and I stood up, and I was in uniform, of course they came over to my side. So we avoided any hassle there, you know. Right away they backed off, you know. Well, it was quite interesting to me, but that happens, you know, with so you know, even now, you know, when soldiers go into some town, especially like overseas, you ever read about it in the papers where they get into all kinds of trouble with the people, you know, the drunken soldiers go there and pick on the women or whatever.
before the war, just before the war, um, were people? Do you remember the big dances? There were. My mother and father tell me about the
Yeah.
Monte, for example.
Well, El Monte was about 14 miles from L.A., and I mean, we were not connected with it. I heard about the big dances they had over there, especially right after the war, because El Monte, they had they used to have fights there too, at the stadium they had there, and they had big dances over there. But we never went to those dances. Most of the dances, as far as the ballroom is concerned, we used to go to the Palladium, or we went to the. This is besides the nightclubs. I prefer the nightclubs, you know. But when we did go to the Zinda Ballroom on 7th Street, I imagine you might have heard about that one. Those are the other one. And then the Avedon that was over there on Spring Street and near Olympic. And that's where Ruben Reyes, we went to see him over there sing when he was in his, in the top of the world at that time.
Rudy, even though people were getting along, a lot of people recall in movie theaters, there was segregated seating that you just had to sit in the back. And
well, it happened.
Remember any of that?
I remember the only thing that happened that was before the war. Tony, my brother, he had a girlfriend that lived in Pasadena, and this was around 1935, 1936. And when he went to the theaters in Pasadena, they used to separate him and make him, sit to one side. I heard about it, but it didn't, really. In Lincoln Heights, we had no problems. When we used to go to the show there, I mean, nobody separated us there as far as that goes.
Okay, I understand. So you enjoyed it in Lincoln Heights?
Oh, I loved Lincoln Heights. It was a great neighborhood. I wish things would go back to the same type of style of neighborhoods, because it was so. You were so comfortable there. I mean, you didn't worry about getting mugged or getting held up or getting ganged on or anything. When we used to go to the show downtown on the streetcar, and we used to come home late, maybe about 12 midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and we get off and walk maybe 4 or 5 blocks from the streetcar to your home. No, you didn't worry about somebody was going to mug you. I mean, life was entirely different.
Yeah, I would like to go back to those times. When did you first get wind, or how did you learn of signs of trouble in Europe?
Well, I was very
Community nervous?
yeah. Well, not so much the community or even in our house, because there was no television to begin with. We were lucky if you had a radio, which we happened to have a radio, but mostly we listened to music and some of the soaps, or like on Saturday night we watched, Amos and Andy, or, Bob Hope, or, Jack Benny and stuff like that. We used to listen to them. But as far as the news about what was going on in the world, I was always very aware of what was going on, because I'm sort of nosy. I mean, I like to read and I like to keep up on what's going on in the world. And so when the war started in 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, and then England went into and all that, and it made headlines, and we used to see the newsreel every weekend at the theater when we used to go. And that's when we used to get the close-up action of what was going on. And in 1940, when the Germans overran France, and the British had to go ahead, and they left the fields there on the beach there, and they went back to England. All kinds of boats were out there, ferrying the people across. And I remember that very well, because I was reading about it and seeing it in the newsreel. And then
People go to theaters just for the newsreels?
no, they used to go because of the movies that we show, Like we had 2 theaters in my neighborhood in Lincoln Heights. There was a Starling Theater and a Daily Theater. The Daily Theater showed all cowboy movies. It was John Wayne and Johnny McBrown and all, that type of movies. Tim McCoy, and I can name you all the, Hood Gibson and all the other.
Right.
And then on the other one, on the Starling Theater, we had a different kind of theater. They used to show the different kind of theater, like Joan Crawford and, Betty Davis and those type of movies. And I used to go to the Starling most of the time. Once in a while, I would go to see the cowboy movies.
Right.
My other brother, George, he used to love to go see the cowboy movies.
Before the war, okay, so Hitler is invading Poland and Czechoslovakia, and what was the feeling about Hitler? What was the chatter? What did the people in the community say about him? What was the feeling about Hitler?
Well, actually, it was not discussed in school at all.
Oh.
It never was discussed in school. I mean, we were just leading a normal teenage, playing sports. I was playing football and basketball and track and all that. And we used to go after school. We used to go every night to the playground and play some more. We used to play in gymnastics on the rings, and we played basketball out there, and we played football. That's all we did. And it wasn't until things started to get close to home when my brother Bill, and I imagine the country knew that we were going to eventually get into it, and that's when they started the draft. And my older brother Bill, he got drafted in September of 1941, even before December the 7th when they had that Pearl Harbor. And on Pearl Harbor, I was on my senior year. I only had about a month to go before I graduated. And I was playing football, and then when the football season ended, I started to work at Clifton's Cafeteria on 7th and Broadway, and working as a busboy and washing dishes and everything else. So at that moment, I remember when December the 7th, the people came rushing into the cafeteria and says, "The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor." I said, "They what?" I said, at that time, I really hadn't even heard about Pearl Harbor except in the movies. I didn't know, you see movies about the military, I mean, usually Navy. And but it was sort of like a small shock to me, because at that point I was 18 years old. And it says, "Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor," So then the headlines on the newspapers, about what happened. That hit home, and then my mother was really worried because she knew that my brother was in already, and that being that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and then when Germany declared war on us even before we declared war on them, automatically we were at war with Japan. But when Hitler declared war on the United States, well, we're in it, and my mother was really worried. But I remember telling my mother, "Don't worry about it." He said, "Oh, those little short Japs," I said, "we'll kick their butt in no time at all." So, anyway.
But after Pearl Harbor, weren't there concerns of a possible bombing of California communities?
Yeah, because as soon as the Pearl Harbor happened, right away they went into a blackout. They started having blackouts. In other words, at night, they used to turn the sirens on when they would suspect there was planes that might be coming in. And we had several blackouts where the whole city went black. I mean, everything went black in the whole area in Los Angeles and the surrounding area. And we had, what did they call them guys? In the neighborhood watch, they used to go around. They were in charge in different neighborhoods. And they would make sure that there was nobody with any lights on. But we used to go out and at night in the dark and on a blackout, and you get accustomed to the dark. You can see the outlines of things. We knew the neighborhood so well. We used to go out there and look up at the sky to see if there was any planes coming and see if But that didn't happen that many times. It only happened 2 or 3 times.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
And then when the Japanese submarine, when they shelled that oil, actually it wasn't even a big refinery. It was just one oil well that was pumping oil right there in around Ventura, between Ventura and Santa Barbara. And they threw a couple of shells over there, and we used to make fun of it. They said they just peed on it,
Right.
But they made big headlines and all that, And,
but by that time, did the family start to gather? The radio became very important then.
Oh, definitely. Everybody was glued to the radio, and I was fascinated every Sunday when I used to go to the show. I mean, I just couldn't wait to see the newsreel about what was going on. I can remember vividly, all the skirmishes that was happening, all through France and in England, the bombing when they were being bombed by the Germans. To me, I could see all this, and it didn't dawn on you that it could even possibly, remotely possible that it would happen in this country. Which, as it turned out, we were fortunate, that we were not in that position where this country was bombed like they were.
Were people, as war broke out in more and more areas, and it was imminent that the United States was going to be sending men overseas.
Absolutely.
Were people afraid, or were they gung-ho?
There were more gung-ho than anything.
Okay.
I mean, when it's amazing when a situation, when something like that happens, that nobody was, to me, from what I sensed about everybody going in, nobody was a coward that said that I'm going to try to go ahead and stay out of the military. There was no way. I mean, everybody, said, well, we're going to go. The two of my brothers, my older brother Bill, he already been drafted, and then the other two, and they came according to age. My brother Tony, he flunked the test because he had a high blood sugar, so he was put on not as a Class A draftee but Class B. And then he got a deferment when he was working, so he was exempt from being, in the military because of those two conditions. Then my other brother George, he had an enlarged heart, and that kept him out of the service. But then I have another story here where my mother took care of my cousin because his father was. Well, he wasn't taking care of him. He used to really live over there in the Watts area, and he used to drink, and he wasn't leading the best kind of life, as for a kid to live in the atmosphere. So my mother went over there and told him, said they were first cousins, and told him, said, you know what? It says, he's going to come and live with me. So we brought him. He came to live with us in 1936. And since he was 12 years, he was the same age as I was. At that time, he was 13. So from there on, him and I being the same age, only a couple of months difference, we were in the same grade in school in Albion, and we graduated from Nightingale. And then after Nightingale, when we started in the fall, when we started high school, he joined the CC camps. Uh-huh. And he was in the CC camps for 18 months. You sign up for 6 months, and he signed up over twice. He signed over, he was in there for 18 months. And I wanted to finish school, and I did. Out of my whole family, I'm the only one that graduated from high school because my mother wanted us. When I was in the 10th grade, she wanted me to quit school and go to work and help support the family. But I figured that my brother Tony, my brother Bill, my sister, and my other brother George, they're away. I think I can manage without having to go to work. And I pleaded with my mother not to force me to quit school because I wanted to finish school, and I did.
Was the military actively drafting or recruiting in L.A. and in communities?
Everywhere. You see posters. You see people that would come to the school. Just before I graduated, because December the 7th, I was a senior, and I was going to graduate in about another month, and they came to the school. One of the what do you call it, the National Guards. They brought in trucks and tanks and everything else and in the football field. They made us spread there and made a big show for us in order to tell the guys, try to join in as soon as we graduated. And they made us, that kind of a spiel.
That's fascinating.
So when I graduated, and a couple of months after graduating, I started to work for Lockheed. And we were building the bombers there that I never dreamed that I would be flying in later on.
Which bombers were you making?
They were making the one that were sent to the British, the Vega Venturas, those Hudson bombers. And we also were building B-17 super fortress, as they called it.
You were a machinist?
I was a machinist,
What did you do?
Well, we used to machine the parts. What else can I do?
I mean, did you work a lathe?
Yeah, I used to work in the radial drills and a jig bore, what they call a jig bore. Uh-huh. And I worked there for about, from March until I got drafted in December the 28th of 1942.
What day?
December the 28th, 1942.
Okay.
And then I went in, I reported over here in St. Pedro at Fort MacArthur, and where we...
Tell me about that day.
Oh, when that day came, just before, when we got called to be drafted, we had to report for a physical and to get inducted. I made an effort because I was afraid that I was going to wind up in the infantry, and I said, that's not for me. The old movies that you see with a guy slashing through the mud, in foxholes and everything. No, that's not for me. So I tried to join the Navy, but they wouldn't take me because it says you've already been drafted, you've been called, you got to wait. I tried to join the Air Force or the Air Corps. They wouldn't let me join at all. They said, you have to wait now until they go. Sure enough, about 2 weeks later, they call my name, and here I go. And it's amazing, we went down, we all
They called your name
to be drafted. Yeah. They sent me the notice I had to report, so we reported to the induction center there, and from there they took us downtown Los Angeles where we took the physicals to see if we would pass. And after we took the physical, and then we went home and we waited until they told us to report. And when they told us to report, we reported to they gave us about 3 or 4 days, and then we reported to 6th and LA Street where the red streetcars used to have the depot there, where they used to. And from there, we took the red streetcars, and then we all went into San Pedro, California, for MacArthur. And all of the guys that were in school with me were all there. All the guys that graduated with me, the guys that I played football with, here we all are together, going down there to Fort MacArthur. We were all just happy in a way, you might say.
Yeah.
But I remember when we first arrived there, and then we went through the line to get your clothing, the issue, the uniform and everything else. And then you take off your civilian clothes and you put them in a bag, and you're going to ship those home. So we get into uniform. As I'm going down the line there was a guy right in front of me getting his outfit, and they had cameras there. They had reporters there. They were taking pictures. I said, what the hell is going on? This guy, they were making a big deal about this guy here, and I was right behind him. And as we went by, and after we got over there, says, well, I asked one of the guys, why were they making such a big deal about this guy here? Don't you know who he was? I said, no, I don't. That's Red Ruffin. He's a Yankee pitcher. He played in the World Series and everything else, No wonder they're making such a big stink over him. So he was right next to me. So then we went in. We got assigned. Everything is you fall in information. They march you everywhere you go, and they marched us to our barracks. And then we said, I'll never forget the first night. We went to the barracks, and I was in my bunk. And it's about 10 o'clock at night, and lights are out, and all I could hear was a foghorn. You know how to go, boo. Oh, man. That made me so homesick right then and there that I think I shed a few tears. I was really, feeling so emotional. That thing really, that sound make you kind of, I don't know, real strange hearing that foghorn the way it did. I can never forget that.
From what you're saying, it sounds like it was telling you, Rudy,
yeah,
you are far from home now.
Exactly.
Your life will never be the same.
Right. And then the next day, though, we started taking all kind of tests. Mm-hmm. And this is where, once you get busy, you make friends. After that, I wasn't, thinking about home at all for the next 3 or 4 days. And so then we took these tests, and they allowed me to go home one day before we were going to ship out. The next day, when I went, back at the base there at Fort MacArthur, they started reading. Everybody falls out. I mean, there were thousands over there and groups up there. We knew where everybody had to stand, and they started reading. The order says, all the following people, all the following soldiers, when I read your name, this group is going to go to Paso Robles, which is over here in next to San Luis Obispo, where there's an infantry. I knew that place well because my brother Bill, that's where he had gone. So they started, and boy, right away, they go alphabetically, your last name. Since I started with A, you listen to see when they're going to call. So, boy, they started calling the people that are going to go to Paso Robles down there to Camp Roberts. And I just sort of, tensed, waiting to hear your name. And when they started and they skipped my name, they went into the B's. Oh, God, thank God I'm not going into the infantry there. So then they kept on calling different areas, like the Quartermaster Corps, and they called several of the guys that were in school with me, like Willie Hunter and Alder Eddy and several other guys that were going to the Quartermaster Corps in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I didn't go there. So and they kept on calling different ones. Finally, when they got to one where it says the following people are going to go, soldiers here, they're going to go to the Signal Corps attached to the Air Force, and the very first name was mine. I said, I'm going to be in the Air Force, Wow, what great, So then as we all boarded the train, as they call your name, you go to the train that they pointed to you there, and you get aboard. And it took us 5 days to get from L.A. to Atlantic City, New Jersey, because 5 days. And you heard of the Harvey Girls?
No.
The Harvey Girls, they made movies when Judy Garland was in one to be, as a matter of fact, where these are the waitresses that worked at railroad stations all the way down, the Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe. And at every train station, they have these restaurants, and they have these waitresses, and they're the Harvey Girls, because the Harvey was a chain of restaurants, and that's what they work for. So they call them the Harvey Girls. Anyway, when we left here, the first stop was in Needles, California there. And the whole troop train gets off and goes in. For the first time I met the Harvey Girls, where they come in and they serve you, you're really great food. So then after everybody eats, back aboard, you take off. The next stop was in Williams, Arizona. And then you have the next meal. And then you kept on going. We stopped all in Hutchinson, Kansas. We stopped in Kansas City, Missouri, and got off the trains at every one of those stops. And they used to feed us. And then we went to St. Louis, Missouri, and we went in to eat there. And they kept on across the country. We went through Pittsburgh, and we used to get off at all these stops. And finally, we arrived at Atlantic City, New Jersey. And that's where I was supposed to take my basic training.
Before we talk about that, why do you think you wound up in the Air Force? What was it? How did I?
Well, later on, I found out how they arrived at that.
How did they?
By your IQ and the test they give you. They give you this 4 days of testing, and to see where you're going to fit in. And in my case, I had a good hearing that I could distinguish the Morse code. As it was, they give you two different sounds, and if they're alike, you mark they're the same. If you said no, you put no. And anyway, that's how on that test I scored pretty high, and that's where I went. But the ones that go into the infantry, for instance, they go at the time. Anybody with an IQ of around 80, automatically they all go to the infantry, from 80 to 90. And then in the IQs in the 90s, they go to the administrative, like Quartermaster Corps or some of these other places. And then in order to be into the Air Force, you had to have an IQ of 110 or better. And in other words, that's the way they classified them, as to, where you would go.
Well, did everybody know that?
And no, they didn't know that at the time. I found this out through the underground, you might say, through the grapevine. Because later on, when I came home and leave, and I talked to some of the people that were doing the recruiting and all that, and there's the one that told me how they went by it.
Because then the infantry would be the pendejos.
Right, exactly. But the guys that are not very sharp, you can go out there and they go ahead and charge.
Right. That's pretty funny. Tell me about Atlantic City.
Well, you figure January, the first week of January, in 1943, and you go to Atlantic City on the East Coast, and they had a bunch of hotels on the big hotels where all the tourists usually go in the summer. The Marlboro Blenheim, that happened to be the hotel where I went to stay in. We stayed there. We had the Traymore. We had all these big hotels, and that instead of being barracks, that's where we were, quartered in these hotels. And from there, I was supposed to take basic training. So they used to make us fall out every morning at 5 a.m. on the boardwalk, which was full of ice, everything. You couldn't even walk. Everybody was falling, and trying to get up. And they make us run up and down the beach, and running back and forth, doing all the physical exercises. Wow. Then you went into the orientation part, where they give you all kinds of different things, different orientations. So then on the second week, when I was supposed to go ahead and start my on the trenches kind of deal, and we marched out to the field, and I was there only one day, and and getting acquainted with a rifle and all that, how you want to how to handle a rifle and everything else. And I got back to my hotel that night. I had orders to ship out, so I didn't have any basic training or boot camp, as they call it in the Navy. So I shipped out, we got on a troop train, and it took us a couple of 2 or 2.5 days to go from Atlantic City.
Hold that thought. I want to go back to Atlantic City for a minute.
All right.
You had nice hotel rooms?
Yeah.
And you're in uniform.
Right.
And you have these nice hotel rooms.
Right.
Okay, and then you would fall out.
Yeah, from there we go out in the front of the street of the hotel there, and then fall out.
How did the people who, the well-heeled people who used to hang there, well, did they see you? Did they say anything?
The thing is that things probably changed afterwards, but at the very beginning there, when they were doing all their drafting, the military they were taking everything over in order to quarter all the soldiers. And it was a beautiful place, it had a great big, well, it was not, what do you call it, the entryway, as you go into like a lobby, but this was to one side, a great big area, where we used to hang out, and all the guys started to write letters in there and all that. And then there was about half a dozen guys that went to school with me, and we're there sitting letters. And then they started playing some music from Casablanca. We saw Casablanca for the first time there in Atlantic City. And when I got home, when the song about Casablanca, where what's the name of that song?
Play it again, Sam.
Right. To each his own, or no. Yeah. Yeah.
What is it?
It was
Time goes by.
As time goes by. Yeah, they started playing that song, and it's so sad. And I started to cry. I started I got homesick again, But
Rudy, was that a good movie back then when you?
Oh yeah, it was great.
Into a classic, was it?
Like it? Yeah, because it was a wartime deal situation in North Africa, and part of it was in France, and when the Germans were involved, and they were involved there in Algiers and all that stuff, where Humphrey Bogart was there. So it was a theme about the war there also. And it was a good movie. Everybody really enjoyed it.
Well, now, of course,
now it's a classic. Yeah,
one of the great movies of all time.
So anyway, I didn't stay there long enough to find out what we did. Go into town the first weekend that we had available there. Our drill sergeant, took half a dozen of us, and we went to what do you call it? A restaurant, a Hungarian restaurant. The first time in my life, I never heard of Hungarian goulash, and I ate some Hungarian goulash. And then we went to a club where they sold drinks and had tables, and I had a bar, and they had music. And one of these, so what do they call that when people can go out now and stand up on the stage and do your act? What do they call that now? They have a name for that. Karaoke. Right, but there was no such word then. But this is basically the same thing. And one of the guys that went to school with me, Leo Garcia, he went up there and sang and volunteered to go up there, and he sang with the microphone. I remember he sang the song, "You're Still the End of December," that song. He sang that song. And they wanted me to get up there, said, "Get out of here." I said, "I don't stand up there like that."
Fantastic. Were there... I'm trying to think of anybody trying to turn a buck off you guys all gathered in Atlantic City. Maybe people wanting to take pictures that you could send home. Maybe prostitutes.
Yes.
Maybe drug dealers. Maybe not necessarily all negative things. But were there people, wherever there are a lot of people, there's somebody trying to turn $1 off.
Right.
Was there any of that?
Yes, basically, yes, because to begin with, where we were at there in those hotels on the boardwalk, and they had a very famous, they call it Steel Pier, right there in Atlantic City, where all the big bands used to go play there. Glenn Miller and Harry James and Tommy Dorsey, they always used to go there. And it was like here at the beach area over here in Oceanside, when the people go over here where they have all the games and stuff like that. And of course, the GIs being there, that's where we go. So we did go over there, and they're all kind of taking pictures. Like on that album of mine, I got the first pictures you see in there in uniform as the ones I took there. So everybody's trying to take pictures and send them home.
Right.
You're real gullible at that point, you want to take a picture, send it home to your family.
At that time, now you're being trained. Now you're beginning to get assignments. Was there a lot of fantasizing of heroic acts or fear of death?
Well, every
Where's really like it?
the thing is, every part of the service is entirely different. If you're in the infantry is one thing, you have a completely different style of life. In the Navy, if you went aboard a ship, like my kid brother happened to be on a tanker, it's an entirely different from being on an aircraft carrier or a destroyer. You know, it's entirely, everywhere you go is different. And the same thing because I experienced. Because when I left Atlantic City and I went to Kansas City, Missouri, again, I mean, this is unbelievable. You know, people can't believe that this has actually happened to me. Mm-hmm. We were staying in hotels in Atlantic City, and when we arrived in Kansas City, I was staying in an apartment, the Summerton Apartments. Mm-hmm. And it was taken over by the military because, like I said, instead of barracks, and there was the K Hotel and some other places that were all taken over by the military to house all the guys there because I was going to go to radio school there. So, and we had a room for 4 of us in this apartment. We had double bunks. You know, mine was the upper bunk in one corner, but we had a big room. We had a kitchenette. We had a private bathroom, and we had all the comforts of home. You couldn't believe it. Said, this is the Army, Mr. Jones. You know, I mean, what do you call this? You know, so it was great. You know, the way it worked. And we went to the mess hall. It was not a mess hall. It was a cafeteria run by civilians that was taken over by the military, and we were being served by the civilians. All the girls that would serve the food for us.
Amazing.
And I mean, the Army. The first couple of weeks, you know, that I experienced here in Fort MacArthur, it was barracks. You go to the typical, you know, Army service. So anyway, when I saw this, and I couldn't believe it. So then we started school, and I happened to be in the second shift. We used to go in at 5 o'clock and go to school until 1 o'clock in the morning. And then on Saturdays we used to go half a day. The day shift would go in the morning, and the night shift would go in the afternoon. So we go in at 1 and we're off at 4. I mean at 5, 4 hours. And then we're free all Saturday night and all day Sunday and all day Monday until Monday night. And in the meantime, I mean, and there were no restrictions. I mean, we could stay out all night if we wanted to. And we had a lot of fun in that. We used to go with a dancer. We used to go to the USO. We used to go to different nightclubs. And while we were going to radio school, we were there for 20 weeks.
Speaking, by the way, was mail delivery consistent at that time?
Here in the state, yes.
Okay.
In the States, the mail was pretty consistent, yeah.
Okay, and do you recall, out of curiosity, if the Dear John letters started coming early or later?
Well, I don't know. I got me a Dear John too, because I had a girlfriend, and I was having a ball in town myself. And I got this letter from her saying that she was having a grand time and all this, you know. And it sort of ticked me off, and I wrote her and said, "Well, if you have such a great time," I said, "Well, good." I said, "Go ahead. I hope you find somebody else," because I was having a ball. And she wrote me a Dear John letter, told me, says, "If that's the way you feel," I said, "Don't expect to hear from me again." I said, "Okay, fine," you know. I answered the letter and I told her I was sorry, but I never heard from her again. So in the meantime, I was having such a grand time there, you know. I had already gotten over my homesickness. I was strictly having a ball in a city like that, you know. It was wonderful, you know. It had a lot of friends, and I used to date different girls, go different places. So
what a great time.
This guy, Art Anderson, and myself, I don't know how he found this. It was across a river, the Missouri River, into Kansas City, Kansas. And they had out in the countryside this place called Jess and Ruby's, and it was Jess and Ruby's. And this was, you know, for the little outside of the town of Kansas City, Kansas. Wow. It was out in like a roadside inn, and all they served there was beer. But they had you know, the jukebox, and they had the girls that would come around and serve you the beer. I had a grand time there, you know. So I met there was two sisters. One was Margie Cocaine, and the other one, her sister, was Pat Cocaine. Anyway, Cocaine was her name. Anyway, Margie sort of, you know, I was attracted to me, so I used to be pretty close to her. And we had a lot of fun. We used to go down there every weekend for quite, you know, towards the end before I shipped out.
That's fabulous. So, what kind of music did they play on the jukebox?
The Harry James, Glenn Miller, all the big bands.
Were there several branches, guys from several branches of the military there, or just Air Force?
No, we were there. We were Signal Corps. We were Signal Corps attached to the Air Force. We wore the patches on the arms. And if you take a look up here behind me, you see the picture up there for the big group of people? That's where I was at in radio school. It was 8,000 soldiers that were going to radio school at that time.
Speaking of radio school, what did that training include, and how good were the radios back then?
Well, that was a very interesting situation because you have to learn the Morse code to begin with. And in order to finish school there, you had to type the Morse code at 20 words a minute. And you had to be able to print it at 16 words a minute. And that's the difficult. Some people they can't handle it. You know, they'll wash out because they can't handle the code. And the rest of the besides the Morse code, you learn how to send the code and you receive it, and then you learn how to do they call them case signals. They're the case signals indicate. Well, you've heard how it says the R represents over and out. In other words, and a message. And that's what the R stands for, you know. And there were a bunch of case signals there, like KAZ or KAX or whatever else. Each one had a meaning. And this is what we use to transmit, you know, messages.
Rudy, how far were those radios? How far did they work?
Well,
be and still talk to the headquarters.
And on ground to ground, it was not the problem. When we were taking the training, I was picking up signals from Alaska, in Kansas City. In fact, when the United States, when we invaded Attu to kick the Japanese out of Attu, I was taking messages and I was hearing the message coming in on code. Wow. And you know, and I got the message that we had taken Attu from the Japanese. You know, wow. So it carries a long ways, okay. And air to air, it carries a long ways too. It carries hundreds of miles.
Could you hear well?
Oh yeah, the code. Yeah, it's not a voice; it's a code.
Code. You're right. What about? So you didn't hear voice?
No, even though the voice could carry, from bomber to tower for pretty good distance, but not that much of a distance.
500 miles?
No, it wouldn't carry 500 miles, no.
Okay.
See, the thing is, in order to understand it, which a lot of people even now they don't understand how the signals work. You have certain signals that go on a straight line. You know, in other words, we had about 6 or 7 different radio sets aboard ship. The 287 was the main one that I used to keep in contact with my home base. You know, I tuned it into the frequency so that I can receive and they would hear me. And then you have the 272 command set, which is the one that the pilot uses to contact other bombers and to contact, the tower when it's coming in for a landing. And then we have the British 522, which is a direct line of sight. And because you're transmitting with that one, and if it hits a building, the signal bounces and you won't get it. Or if it hits a mountain, it won't get it. In other words, it won't go over. So, and then we had what they call the Gibson girl. There was a little portable thing that in case we had to crash in the ocean or if you crashed on land wherever, you could use that little radio by cranking it and send messages with it.
Why did they call it Gibson Girl?
Well, that's what they called it. I don't know why.
We're okay. How did you... I'd like to know how you got into the B-24 squadron, and I also want to know...
All right.
Crossed your mind the first time you laid eyes on a Liberator, because it is an unusual-looking plane.
Yeah, they had a nickname. They used to call them, banana boats, or different names like that,
It has
or the coffin, it looks to represent like a coffin, They had all kinds of nicknames for it. But after I finished radio school, this is where my career really took off. So from there, I went to Fresno, California, to Hammer Field. And all the guys in my crew, not in my crew, in my class, we all were supposed to go right then in Fresno to another camp, they call it Camp Pinedale, to learn how to take Japanese code.
Oh, my.
That's where I was scheduled to go. But at that point, me and several other guys decided to say, well, I wanted to fly. I wanted to get up and fly. So I went in and I applied to go to gunnery school. And I had to take you have to qualify for different written tests, as well as the ability to, they take you in that what they call the altitude chamber, where they suck the air out, and they take you up to different altitudes. When you sit in there and they tell you write your name and your serial number, and you write it down. And then they take you up to 5,000 feet, and they do the same thing. 10,000 feet, do the same thing. They get you up to 18,000 feet without oxygen, and you sign your name on it. So then they bring you down slowly again back to ground level, and then it says, okay, read what you just wrote. And you can see that by the time you get to 18,000 feet with a lack of oxygen, you're scribbling. You're not writing very clear. The deprivation of the air, it affects your mind.
Were you alone when you did this, or were there other people?
No, there were all a whole bunch in the big chamber there. There's a whole bunch of us. Anyway, there so happened that two guys, one guy, they had to take on. He started bleeding from the nose. He couldn't take the pressure. So at that point, they have an outside chamber there that is equal in pressure, and they put him in there. Another guy started screaming about his ears. He couldn't take the pain. Two of them couldn't go any higher, so they put him in the chamber, and they bring him down back to ground, pressure. So the rest of us, we all passed, and there they take you up to 18,000 feet, and they say, anytime you're going to be deprive you of air, at 10,000 feet, you have to start breathing oxygen. So,
when were you introduced to the B-24?
Well, then I went to gunnery school. From there, they shipped me out to gunnery school. I went to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada, and that's where I started learning. And they put you through the whole process of learning about your machine gun. You have to disassemble it and blindfold it and put it together again. And they show you all about how your what do you call that thing? I can't remember right now the word they use for that. Anyway, it's a school you learn how to calibrate your machine guns and your bomb sights and everything else. How to allow for wind drift, and drop, and the speed of your plane and the speed of the wind, and they compute everything. And you learn how to calibrate your equipment so that you make sure you hit the target. And that's where they take you through that training. Then that's a 6-week course. The last 2 weeks, you start flying. And that's when I went to that Indian Flats over there, where now that's where they used to drop test the atomic bombs. Yes. That's where we used to go up and down those canyons. And the first experience you have is shooting air to air. I flew in an AT-6, for 6 days in a row. You fly on this trainer, the pilot's in the front and you're in the back with a 30 caliber machine gun. And then you fly and the target is being towed by another plane, and you shoot at the target. And everybody that goes up has a different color painted on the bullet, so that when you hit the target and you go down, they count the bullet holes that have your color and know how many hits you made.
That's astonishing. What did the target look like?
It was a big sheet of being towed. I don't know, maybe it was about 40 or 50 feet long and about maybe 6 or 8 feet high. And
how far behind the plane was it?
Well, it was being pulled by a cable. It was quite a distance. It was a big. You've seen advertising here when they fly over the ballparks here, and they have a plane towing a target advertising. It's the same thing, the similar thing.
If I was the guy pulling that white sheet, I would have been really worried about
there's some of
19 and 20-year-old kids.
Well, some of the pilots, they used to be afraid of that, that they would get hit. And some of them did get hit on the tail, but never shut down. And several times they busted the cable too. The bullets would hit the cable and busted, and then you have to come back, But it's amazing the way it happens, because I love to fly. I right away, I couldn't wait to get up there.
Wow. And
one guy, we had an experience where he grounded himself because after the shooting, and we're heading back to the base, and see if when you're shooting, you unstrap yourself. And you have what you call 2 little belts on each side that hooks onto the belt you're wearing, so that when you're going to fire, you unhook the belt that holds you on the seat, and you stand up, and you're hooked onto these things so that you won't pop up when you hit an air pocket or something.
Interesting. Right.
So anyway, this one guy, when after he got through shooting, and before he could attach this thing, and the things that were holding on to him, like that's all he had was holding on, and he was standing up, and he dropped real fast on an air pocket like that, and he went up, and the belts busted, and he flew up in the air. We were wearing a parachute, a backpack, and he slid down the fuselage and all the way to the tail and hanging onto the plane like that. So I was watching him because we're in the same, there were 6 bombers, 6 AT-6 trainers, and we're flying back to the base there over the mountains, and I could see him, back there. So when we got over the base, I flying right next to him, and I could see the pilot telling the guy, says, "Go over, let go." And the guy would shake his head. No, he was so scared he wouldn't do it. So finally the pilot, flew over the base, and he wouldn't let go. So he flipped the plane over on his back, and the guy had nothing to hold on. So down he goes, because he couldn't land with him on the tail. So the guy, so when he turned over and he had to go down, and then he did pull the cord in the parachute. He landed in the parachute, but he got so scared that he grounded himself. He didn't want to fly again. So some experiences.
Why?
Well, I don't know. I mean, people are different. But anyway, to conclude that portion of it, after this is how you learn the very beginning. Then the second week you fly in the bombers. That's when I first flew on. I didn't fly the B-24, but I did fly on the B-17 Flying Fortress, which is a big bomber, just like the B-24. And there's where we got some more experience firing from different positions on that bomber.
The B-17 at that time was the best we had, I believe.
Well, it was both. Actually, it was both the B-17 and the B-24s. They were right there at right from the very beginning, both of them.
What I wanted to ask you is, were you impressed by what you saw then?
As far as the planes, yeah. I mean, I saw this firepower that a big bomber had. They carried they carry one more machine gun than a B-24 on a B-17, because a radio operator where he has his radio, there's a door or a latch on top like that that's clear plastic, and you open it up like that, and there's a machine gun that shoots up through there, and he can shoot from there too. So that's an extra gun. Ordinarily,
so those were plexiglass?
Yeah, plexiglass. So you have turrets, a twin turret in the front with two guns, 2 in the back, 2 on top, 2 on the bottom, and 1 on each waist. That's a total of 10.
Plexiglass scratches easily. Did you ever take precautions to keep them scratching? Because if they scratch, you couldn't see.
Yeah, well, to begin with, the turrets are the only ones that could possibly get scratched. Okay. And there was never a problem as far as being scratched. Okay. They never came up. Okay. Because to begin with, when they were clean in such a way that they would not scratch them, But then again, we're talking about a war that we were totally, really 100% prepared for. I mean, we stumbled all the way down the line. I mean, everything was, basically, what do you call, trial and error. Like even the bombing that we did before we got radar. There was all. If you had a cloud cover, you just drop your bombs wherever they fall.
Really?
I mean, you couldn't bomb accurately when you couldn't see the target.
Why did you have to drop them?
Well, you're over the target. You're not going to carry them all the way back, so we used to just drop them. Sometimes we dropped them in the ocean. Sometimes we dropped them, whatever, we figure out in the country, wherever it was. We were indiscriminately, you just drop them.
I want to talk about the bombs in a minute. But before we do that, could you just summarize for me what was the mission of the B-24? Payload, range, attack altitude.
All right.
What was it meant to do?
Well, to begin, all right, I'll break it down to you this way. You have fighters that you more or less understand what a fighter would do. He go there and try to protect you, fight other fighters that are trying to attack you. Yeah. And then we got medium bombers. Medium bombers can only go a certain distance. They got twin engines, and they go and bomb targets, which they go maybe a couple of 100 miles. What they do, besides the fighters, the dive bombers and the medium bombers, and then the heavy bombers. Now, let's start with the heavy bombers, which is what I flew.
Yeah.
They call that the strategic bombers, because we used to go to the main source, like the oil refineries, the railroad complexes, railroad yards, and that we had. They call them marshalling yards. We bombed bridges. We bombed aircraft factories, ball bearing factories, oil storages, far behind the lines, 500-600 miles behind the lines. Wow. The medium bombers, and what they tried to do was go ahead and choke off at that point, and at that point it would take it affects in a sense 6 weeks from the time the target that we bombed. The stuff that they were producing would take, like oil and gasoline, takes 6 weeks to be felt at the front. Mm-hmm. Now, whatever we destroyed and whatever trickled out of there, and they shipped towards the front where the fighting is going on, the medium bombers would attack in the middle, halfway to the front. They would knock out, smaller bridges and convoys and stuff like that, and different targets that were closer to the front.
Fascinating.
And then the fighters, and they also call them fighter bombers because they, like the B-47, and carried a bomb load too. They were a real good fighter and also a good aircraft for dive bombing. Mm. And they would go down to anything they got past at that point, from the heavy bombers to the medium bombers, and what trickled to the front, they would attack everything on the roads and everything else coming close to the front to choke off. So that whatever got to the front was very small amount. And this is what they did to choke it off. And they used to have, trains going to the front. A burst of fire from they carried 50 caliber machine guns on the wing, like a P-51 Mustang. And when they attacked that thing, a blast of those things, in 2 or 3 bursts of fire from as they come in, and they hit a locomotive, it was the forces enough to go ahead and derail the engine. It's a burst of those things is equal to a 2.5-ton truck going 60 miles an hour and hitting a brick wall. That's the power of the impact that those 6 machine guns had when they hit the target.
Was there a special kind of bullet where they steel jacket or?
Well, that's another thing. We fired the 50 calibers, and what we carried was what they called out of every 5th bullet was a tracer, and then 2 bullets was armor piercing,
I see.
And then there was 2 bullets that were armor piercing incendiary. So that the 2 bullets that would penetrate armor piercing, and the other ones could penetrate in their incendiary that would blow up the plane by hitting the fuel or whatever.
That's incredible, man. Wow. What was the attack altitude?
Well, when we used to take off and go up and fly in formation, which this is the reason it used to take so long to fly. You might say, you think 500 miles is not that far. But by the time you take one plane, and by the time they rendezvous with the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and they form into a formation, and they start climbing to the target, and then you rendezvous with some of the other bomb groups going to the target, and then you're climbing, and you're going slower when you're climbing with a full bomb load and gas load. And then our bombing altitudes vary. The lowest we ever bombed was 21,000 feet. And the highest we ever bombed was 27,000 feet.
That's way up there.
Yeah, it gets pretty cold too. It gets to the heated suits that we used to wear to keep us warm, because and the oxygen that we had to breathe. It's so cold up there that you have to have warm clothing. Otherwise, you're going to freeze to death. Several people got frostbite. And when you're flying over there and you want to know how cold it is, I used to call the nose and talk to the navigator. Shorty, we used to call him, and I asked him, Shorty, he said, how cold does your thermometer say? How cold is it? And he would tell me 50 degrees below. That's how cold it gets. And then the windshield. When you open the window, you stick your machine gun out, and that wind is hitting you. That the wind shear, the way it hits you, it's so cold. And see, you're wearing your oxygen mask and you're wearing goggles, but the goggles you take them off and put them on top of your head because they get clouded over. You can't see through them because of the cold. you get icicles in your eyelashes. And when you're breathing and the warmth of your breath and your nose, the pressure is starting, your nose is starting to run, and you take a breath and you take your oxygen mask off and you blow your nose on your glove and you stick it out the window and instantly it's frozen. And that's how cold it gets. And as far as there's nothing that can keep you warm except that heated suit.
When you say heated suit, what does that mean?
Well, the suit that I had, well, to begin with, I wound up with the latest of up to the, what do you call it, the top of the line thing that they had at the time. The first one that they issued us was World War I type heated suit, which was like a long john pajamas with a zipper down the middle and had wires running through it. And had a pair of leather gloves.
Long johns with wires.
Right. And the gloves were plain leather gloves with wires in it, and they would attach, plug them into your suit. And the suit had a cord, like you would plug in an iron on the wall, and you plug it into the side of the ship there where they had the receptacle, and you could adjust the temperature, as hot as you wanted to. And well, the electricity going to the suit, it warms up the suit. It's just like nowadays I got heated blankets. It worked in the same principle. But these were so old and obsolete that on my third mission, my hands were freezing because mine, they short-circuited, the gloves short-circuited, and they were burning my hands and they were not heating my hands. And I wound up with my hands frozen, and they were so cold. And we got jumped by about 28 to 30 German fighters over Ploesti. And I had to put one hand on my crotch to keep it warm and fire with one hand. And then when that hand got so frozen, I would exchange the fire with the other one. Finally, we were lucky we didn't get shot down because we shot down 8 out of the 30 and we didn't lose any bombers that day. But my hands were so frozen that after the fighters left us, I sat down on my hands for I don't know how long, about maybe half an hour before I could start feeling any of the blood circulating back into my fingers. It felt like a bunch of pins were being stuck in my fingers.
Really? That's just incredible stuff. Honest to God. That's amazing.
So then after you get through, and you start flying back and you get attacked by fighters on the way to the target. And when you're over that target, that flak that I'll show you right here what I have.
Yeah.
This is a couple of pieces of flak that came and they hit my ship. They come in all different sizes because when a shell explodes up in the air, all that shrapnel breaks up into all different kinds of sizes, like this size and this size, in between, bigger and smaller. And this one here, this big one here, I say that it happened to have my name on it, but it missed the target because it hit the gun mount where my machine gun is anchored, and it ricocheted and it brushed my heated suit, and it didn't penetrate it. I just felt it, and it ricocheted back and forth inside the ship, and it landed down on the ground or on the bottom there, and that's how I got a hold of this chunk of what they call flak. And this little one was also a piece of the stuff that we collect. I mean, they're hard to find once, the shrapnel, you don't know where they disappeared to inside the ship. But this big one here is the one that I recovered because I followed the trajectory of when it hit the gun mount and it ricocheted and I heard it hit the framework. If it would have hit the aluminum siding, it would have gone through it. But instead it hit the framework and it made a dent on there, and it ricocheted a couple of times after that, after the force was spent. And then I could hear it, bing, bing, bing from different directions, and finally I heard it drop someplace.
We're going to come back to that in a minute. Were these planes noisy?
Well, yes and no. It's a hum. You hear the humming of the engines, which is like a lullaby. It really, it's a beautiful sound. Once you get used to listening to that sound, you know that everything is fine because you hear the hum of those engines the way they're going. When you first take off, they really roar. You could hear the power, But once you get to cruising altitude and the engines are, they're running at 3,300 RPM, and they bring them down to where, it's a cruising type of a deal, your level. And then the engine, you just hear the hum of the noise of the engine. So just like when you hear a engine plane flying overhead now, you hear the hum of the engine. And it's really a pleasant sound because, you know, you get used to it. And you know that as long as that sound is there, your plane is flying real good.
Right. Were these planes comfortable? They didn't have padding, did they?
No, that was just the aluminum skin
Yeah.
in the framework. And the same thing with the deck, and everything was just metal and aluminum. And there was
You have seats?
no, there were no seats. The only seats were the pilot and the co-pilot had a seat, and the radio operator, when you operated the radio, they had a little seat there where you would sit down to send your messages. But everybody else, you know, you don't. You sit on whatever you find, you know.
And were the bombs visible or?
Oh yes, definitely. Because to get from the front of the plane to the back of the plane, you have to go through the bomb base. Okay. There's a catwalk in between, and you walk the catwalk, and the bombs are hanging on both sides. And on the B-24, when you get inside the B-24, when we're going on a mission, the bombs are right there, and you just slide in between the bomb and the catwalk, and you get up and you go to your position. So you see what kind of bombs you're carrying. They're either 500 pounders. 500 pounders are for destroy aircraft factories and to destroy refineries and the such. And then you carry 100-pound bombs. We used to carry 10 of the 500 pounders. We used to carry 40 of the 100-pound bombs because those are to create more damage when you bomb an airfield and creates a lot of damage. And we also have what they call frag bombs, fragmentation bombs. We used to carry clusters of 400 of those, clusters. And those, when they're dropped, the little bombs, and they're like a hand grenade. When they hit the ground and they explode, they scatter a shrapnel in every direction, and they create a lot of damage.
The bombs, were they calibrated to go off at a certain altitude or
No.
when they hit the ground?
When they hit the ground, there's a fuse in there.
Okay.
And there's a little propeller in the front, and it's got a little carter pin that holds it in place.
I see.
And as long as that carter pin is there, the thing cannot penetrate. But before you get to the target, the bombardier goes over and he pulls the pins out of every one of those bombs, and the propeller is there. So when the bombs are dropped and they hit the wind, the propeller unscrews, and the bomb is fused.
Gotcha.
So that as soon as they hit something, they explode.
So they're not going to probably blow up on the plane then?
No, the only play they want, like it happened to some people that we witnessed, where they have friendly fire in their fences, was they drop bombs on you. We had that happen.
We're going to come to that in a minute. How did you get overseas, by the way? I didn't ask.
It was a unique experience, which not everybody did it this way. After gunnery school, and after we had our flight training. To begin with, leading up to that, on the Thanksgiving Day of 1943, I was in Salt Lake City, where I shipped out from gunnery school, and in Salt Lake City, we got together as a crew. They woke me up at 4:30 in the morning, telling me you're shipping out, and I didn't even know, I had no idea that was coming. So I threw all my stuff together in my barracks bag. I had 4 bags that I had to carry over my shoulders. I had 2 barracks bags full of my personal clothing, and the other one was an A3 bag that had all my flying equipment. It had my parachute. It had my fleece line, equipment. The jacket and the pants and the shoes. And on the other one also had some more flying equipment with a B4 bag. So I had to carry all these bags and walk about 1.5 miles to the shipping area. And then there it was 5 o'clock in the morning. We're standing up there in November on Thanksgiving Day, and that's where we first got together as a crew. And this was only the enlisted men, not the pilot or the officer, because in a bomber, the pilot is a lieutenant and an officer, and he's the one in charge of the aircraft. And then you got the co-pilot, which is also a lieutenant. And then we had the bombardier, the lieutenant, and the navigator. And those are the 4 positions that have officer's rank. And the rest of them, you have a radio operator and an engineer, which get the rank of tech sergeant when they get to the top of the rank, which is what I did. I became a tech sergeant in the end, and so did the engineer. And the other 4 gunners in the ship, their rank goes up to staff sergeant.
So how many members?
There's 10 men aboard the ship.
10 men.
You got the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier. The pilot and the co-pilot, they fly the ship. The navigator navigates the ship. The bombardier is the one that drops the bombs. The gunners at each position got a gunner in the nose a gunner in the tail, a gunner on the ball turret, a gunner on the upper turret, and then a gunner on each waist gun. So that's 10 machine guns that we have.
Was there any logic to the crew, assembling the crew, that on how well people got along, or?
No, they just throw you together. You throw it together, and well, we happen to get along pretty well. There's a couple of people that I had a little bit of friction with, but nothing major really. So we get together as a crew, and then we shipped out, went to Wendover, Utah, which we were supposed to take our training there because it looked like a moonscape up there in the salt flats of Utah. But we were only there for a week, and then they shipped us out because that field was being taken over by the crews that had dropped the first atomic bomb and tested it, and they were training the crews to the Enola Gay and all the other ones that dropped the bomb in Japan. They're the ones that were taking over that field to start training to drop the bomb at a certain altitude. It took time to perfect that thing. So we shipped out and came to March Air Force Base in Riverside, California.
They didn't know what they were training for.
Well, at the time they didn't know, no. And since I wasn't with them, we shipped out and we came to March Air Force Base to do our training, which we practiced for 3 months together as a crew. We used to fly over the mountains over here, and we go over to the Rogers Dry Lake over where Edwards Air Force Base is now. That was our practice bombing range. We used to fly day missions, we used to fly night missions, and we always used to fly at high altitude. We had to wear our oxygen. That's where I had my first experience where I was lucky that I didn't die from lack of oxygen, because I was going to send my radio position report that was part of the training. And it's at night, and I look at the pilot and the board, the dashboard there where it gets all the instruments, the instrument panel, and they're in luminous lighting, in the dark, they light up. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to log to see what time it was, and I looked at the clock, and everything was blurry, and I said, I can't even distinguish what is. I can't see it, started yawning, I'm getting sleepy. Mm-hmm. And I said, I can't go to sleep. I can't go to sleep. I got to stay awake. And so I have to send this position report. So I had my hands on the table like this, and one my left hand was on my knee like that. And I said, I'm so sleepy. I'm going to go to sleep. And I laid my hand down, my head down on my table there where my radio is. And I was going to go to sleep. My left hand dropped, and I felt that my oxygen hose was disconnected. So I had enough left, so I connected it and took a deep breath, and then everything cleared up. So, wow, and it happened again a little bit later, and right away I knew the symptoms, so I connected it again. It was a faulty connection. I reported it, and when I came down so I could get that thing fixed, because it's a suction type of a deal. It's tapered and it's suction that keeps together. The same thing as you do when you're flying overseas. You connect your oxygen. You connect it with an oxygen hose, for your oxygen. You connect it with one with your intercom. You connect it one for your heated suit. You connect it with all these wires and everything is necessary.
That's incredible.
So anyway, after we got together as a crew and we did our training, and you wanted to know about going overseas. Yeah. Well, we were fortunate. A lot of the crews were shipped over by ship, but we went to Hamilton Field in San Francisco, and we picked up our bomber to fly it overseas. And it was a great experience because we picked it up in San Francisco, and we left there on March the 19th of 1944 to go overseas. And we flew from there to Sky Harbor, Phoenix. We spent the night in Sky Harbor in Phoenix. And then the next day we flew to Midland, Texas, and again, another close call. We're coming in the middle of a dust storm, and those dust storms in Texas, they really get real bad. We're coming in, the whole sky is full of red dust flying all over the place. As we're coming in for our landing gear is down, we're losing altitude and losing speed. And just at that point, we got hit by a gust of wind and blew us off the runway. And we were flying right over the other aircraft that were parked on the ramp. And boy, we gunned the machine gun, the engines, right? The pilot gunned the engines, and we just barely scraped on top of those bombers, and the other planes were on the ground. And we had to circle and go back up again and then come back to land. I mean, that was a real close call.
That is astonishing.
And it had happened once before when I was training in March Air Force Base on Christmas Eve of 1943. We were flying at night, And we took off, and then they called us back, and it was an instructor pilot who was flying with us, Lieutenant Price. And as we're coming into land, because the field was being fogged in, we had to come back. If we did not land, that means we would have to fly over the mountain to go land in Palmdale and spend Christmas over there. So as we're coming in, right across the highway from March Air Force Base, there was a Camp Callan, which was an artillery outfit. And there's rows of barracks, you know, all the way down parallel to the highway, parallel to the runway. And this Lieutenant Price, as he come in like that, he started to make this approach to land, and he's going to land between the barracks. You know, there's a light bulb on each barracks, and look like the lights from the runway. And I see what he's doing, and I holler, say, "Hey, those are barracks down there." And again, he gunned the engines, and we just went right over the barracks. And we flew around again and finally came and landed. That was another close call that we had. And that's the way accidents happen. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, from Sky Harbor, Phoenix, we went to Midland, Texas. And from Midland, Texas, we went to Memphis, Tennessee. And we were grounded there for 2 days because it was a big storm all through the south of the United States at that time, and being in March, you know. And from there, after 2 days, we flew to, we're going to West Palm Beach, Florida, to Morrison Field. But the weather was so bad that we tried to climb over the clouds. We couldn't. We went up to 30,000 feet, and we couldn't get over the clouds. So we came down below, see if we get in below, and we're flying 200 feet above the ground. And we're flying over the Okefenokee swamps over in southern Georgia and Jacksonville, Florida. And we finally spotted a field, and we landed there in Jacksonville. We spent the night there, and the next day we flew from there to Morrison Field. We spent the day and the night there. The next day, in the morning, we took off from there and we flew to Trinidad. In Trinidad, we spent the night. The next day, we flew to Belém, Brazil, at the mouth of the Amazon. Boy, the humidity was horrible there. People can live there. We flew right over the Amazon River there, and then we landed in Belém. The next day, we flew from there to Fortaleza, Brazil. We flew over the Amazon jungle and over a range of mountains, and we landed in an airfield in Fortaleza, Brazil. We spent all day and all night and all the next day, 8 o'clock at night, 10 minutes to 8, we took off and we flew to Dakar, Africa. It took us 13 hours to fly across the ocean, and we landed in Dakar, Africa. We spent the day in Dakar, and that next day we flew to Marrakech, French Morocco. We spent the night in Marrakech, French Morocco, and then the next day we flew through the Atlas Mountains and over into the Kasserine Pass and over into Tunisia. We landed in Bizerte. We stayed there that day and that night, and the next night we took off and we flew to Italy, and we were assigned to my bomb group.
What an amazing story. Let me ask you this. If something had happened to your plane in, say, Trinidad or Brazil, could you have done anything about it? I mean, did they have parts there? Did they?
To repair them? They would have. All around the route, they had mechanics. They had other, things. They're all prepared for it. And listen, here's an ironic thing that happened just a few years ago. I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I ran across a little article, a real small article in the neighborhood newspaper, where they had discovered a bomber that was flying overseas, which was happened to be in April, which was maybe a week or two after I had gone through there. And this bomber, whatever happened, they have no idea what happened, but they found the bomber. It crashed in the middle of the jungle, and all the 10 men, they were killed. They rediscovered that bomber. They were on the same route that we were taking. Only how he got messed up might have been in a storm. They blew him inland, because most of the time you follow the coast of Brazil to get over the jungle. And I read that article, and that's how we lost a crew there.
I think we're at the point now where we can start talking about missions. I'm really interested in knowing about your very first mission. Now, you trained with other crews, right, to get combat experience?
Right, when you...
and before you went on your own...
right. When we arrived over there and we got assigned to a crew, we arrived over there on April the 5th of 1944. And,
where's over there?
And this is in southern Italy, in Grataglia, which is not too far from the port city of Toronto. It's on the heel of the boot. There was airfields all over southern Italy at the time because the front lines that we were fighting at that time was between Naples and Rome. That's the battle, the ground fighting was going on there. And so when we arrived there, and we were assigned to our bomb group there, and after the orientation, you get checked out all over again. You have this orientation type of deal as to what to expect, what to do, and all that stuff. And we go to the briefings, even though we're not flying. We're admitted to go to the briefings to find out what happens, how the whole thing works. And being that I was a radio operator, I had to go to radio briefing first, and then go to the main briefing. So when the way we found out, because we were living in real primitive type of deals, we got, even though it was in a country like Italy, it was not like in the islands over in the Pacific. Here, you figure you have a little bit more of, up-to-date things. But as it was, the main briefing room was a big building, which was pretty adequate as far as that goes. But to begin with, let me first acquaint you with how a squadron and a bomb group works. Now, on a bomb group, there's 4 squadrons, which mine happened to be the 449th Bomb Group. Now, we had 4 squadrons, which was the 716th, the 717th, 718th, and the 719th. I was in the 719th Bomb Group. Now, squadron rather. 449th Bomb Group, 719th Bomb Squadron. Each squadron, top efficiency, they really, they got the amount of aircraft that they need. They're supposed to have 20 bombers to each one that compromises a bomb group, but they was never had more than 12. And most of the time, we only had about 7 or 8 from each squadron. So there's 4 squadrons to a bomb group. Now, there's 4 bomb groups, like we were in the 449th Bomb Group, and then we had the 98th, the 376, and the 450. There's 4 bomb groups. That compromises a wing, and that was the 47th wing, the one I belonged to. Now they have a bunch of wings that compromise a division, and so many divisions compromise an air force. So when you break it down that way, down the line, you understand what a squadron is, and so many bombers in a squadron. So we all go to the main briefing, all 4 squadrons from the group, all the crews that are flying, because in our what they call our operations room, which is at the end of the field, close to where we were quartered, where we lived in tents, and we walked down to that operations, and they have a blackboard about the size of a regular blackboard, about maybe 5 by 4 feet high and about maybe 6 or 8 feet wide. It's a blackboard, and in there, in chalk, they put all the crews that are flying and the names of the crew that are flying. And since when you first start, they break your crew so you can get flight experience, combat experience, and I flew with a different crew. So when I went down there and I saw on the board that I was flying, I was the first one in my crew to fly a mission, because I was a radio operator and they were short of a radio operator on one of the other crews, and that's who I flew with on my first mission. And my first mission was to Budapest. That's where this friend of mine that was also a radio operator, Norman Reed, him and I went all through Salt Lake City, through our training here in the States, and we flew overseas, and we're overseas, and we wind up in the same squadron. And when we were flying, he was flying with another crew, and I was flying with a different crew also. So over that target, his ship blew up, and he got killed on our very first mission. That was
it. See it?
Oh yes.
Could you describe it?
Well, did you ever witness? You see it on television about an explosion of a gas tank or whatever. It blows up like in the movies. They make a big orange, red, like a ball of flame. That's what it looked. Well, that's what it was. With the thing, and the ship blew up. All you saw was a great big ball of a red, intense, real red orange. A flame, a big ball. You didn't even see the parts of the plane, because when it blew up, it blows up so fast and it disintegrates, and all you see is a big ball of fire, and that's all I saw. And I knew who was in that plane because he was flying right next to me.
Rudy, approximately how much time passed between you're being drafted and your first mission?
Well, I was drafted.
How long did it take to go through all this to get to this point?
I would say about 14, 15 months.
So more than a year passed before you were finally in your first mission.
Right.
And I'm just amazed at all of the work, all of the training, all the money, all the strategies that were in play to get you guys to the front.
Right. See, the same thing with the officers. You know, the officers, when they learn how to fly, by the time they bring them, by the time they learn how to fly the bomber, and by the time they get enough experience flying the bomber, and then by the time they get assigned to a crew, it all takes time. Yeah. And as far as some of the crew members, for instance, some guys don't have to be there in the service that long, because towards the end of the war, they were drafting them in, go straight to, from a boot camp and basic training. They go straight to gunnery school, get assigned to a crew, and ship them over as replacements. So some guys did not, actually were not in that as long as I was. My process was stretched out because I went to a radio school for 5 months. And then I went on and I was what they call a casualist, when you're waiting to be assigned to another crew. And then from there I had to go to gunnery school, which took another couple of months. And then from there I had to wait to get assigned to a crew. And then by the time you get assigned to a crew, and then you spend 3 months together as a crew. So it all takes time.
Your first mission, what was your attitude?
Well, to me, it was an experience that you can't describe it. I knew I was flying. We had witnessed the other bombers taking off every morning, going on mission before we got to fly. Mm-hmm. And we go down there and watch them take off, and they're all in line, one after the other, and all the engines are running, and and you could hear the noise, and and the dust that they pick up, because everything was dirt and dust over there. And they all start, taxiing. They go get in line to the end of the runway. There was only one runway. And you hear the plane, and you watch them as the one roars down the runway, and they keep on going. And as soon as the wheels of the plane leaves the ground, the next plane guns it, and they go down the runway. And then the next one, and the next one after the other. And we used to watch this every single morning, when they were taking off. And then when it's your turn to fly, that's kind of a funny feeling, It's so hard to describe, because here you are, you're going to go on your first bombing mission. You don't know what to expect. Really, you don't know. You're going to go drop bombs someplace. And since I was flying on the waist gun as a replacement with this crew on my first mission, and we took off, and after, all you do is just watch what's going on with all the other planes getting together, and we get together into formation. And then when you start flying towards the target, we flew across the Adriatic Sea, and then you get the order to test fire your guns. You test fire your guns over the ocean, to make sure they're working properly. Mm. So then you test fire your guns, and you got oxygen. By that time, we're at about 14,000 feet, and you had to have oxygen. And you see all the bombers all over the sky. I mean, you see hundreds of planes, and everybody going towards all of the Balkans and Europe, have all, going to Austria or going to wherever they're going. We happen to be going to Hungary, Budapest. So as we crossed the border, and I was always looking down outside to see where we were, and we were on the lookout to see if we're going to get jumped by fighters. And I also look at the landscape, and I see the landscape as we get over the land, over Yugoslavia, and then you cut over and go into Hungary. And the thought that came to me in that particular time of my first mission, what brought to mind, was the Transylvanian mountains. That was Dracula. That's what went through my mind. I said, that's where Dracula was, supposed to be. So anyway, that's what went through my mind,
But were you scared? You didn't know?
I wasn't scared, no. The thing that I was scared more of was a takeoff. Because I'm carrying a whole bunch of bombs, and I got a bunch of gasoline in this thing. It says, if we don't make it off the runway, you can kiss it goodbye. Because it happened before. It happened several times. The day we arrived at our group overseas there, what greeted us at the end of the runway, when we landed on our plane and we taxied around at the end of the runway, all I could see was 4 smoldering engines. That's all that was left of the plane that morning had taken off on a mission and didn't make it off the ground. It blew up, and all 10 men were killed. I mean, you look at that and say, wow, So, I mean, how can I explain to you that when you're only 20 and 21 years old, I mean, it's not a matter of the kind of fear that you would expect under the maybe like in the infantry when you're going down sloshing through there, and you're probably looking around to see somebody shooting, and then when they do shoot at you. However, here, not until you get off the ground and you're flying to the target, you see all these other bombers that are flying with you, and you don't feel anything really until somebody hollered, "Fighters!" You're at that point. You can probably feel this yourself sometimes when you're going to have you avoid an accident. You have that instant deal that your heart sort of jumps to your throat. And that's the kind of feeling you get when somebody hollers "Fighters!" and you look out the window, you see the enemy fighters coming at you. But then you're so busy shooting at them that you're not scared. I mean, you're just busy doing something. You're shooting.
I want to talk about the shooting in a minute, but I want to ask you, Rudy, if you were new, you didn't have experience in combat. When you joined this first crew, were they wary of you? Were they?
Oh yeah,
I know what he's doing.
Well, that's why they put you in there with the experienced crew, because they keep an eye on you to see how you're going to react.
I see. Okay.
And as far as I was concerned, I reacted the normal way. When they say fighters, and I look at the fighters and I'm ready to go. And I'm looking at it, and when I saw the fighters, and I started shooting. And the report was that I passed the test. And I flew 3 missions with a different crews before I was assigned to my.
How facile were these guns? Did they move easily?
Oh yeah. Well, the turrets are different. The waist gun, you can move that real easy, any direction, up and down, sideways, whatever you want. But the turrets, they're electrical, hydraulic. You press buttons, and you, like you're holding gun, like this, and you press a button and it goes up and down, and you can go, the way you go, sideways, up and down, whichever way you go.
Okay. Well, so while you're learning, they're trying to get this plane through a combat mission. How did you communicate with each other on the plane in combat? Was it difficult?
No. To begin with, we all have throat mics, and the mics they're attached to a little snap button, and there's 2 little round deals that press against your throat here, and that carries the sound. It's amazing how well the sound comes. So anyway. When you put on that throat mic, you can talk to anybody in the crew. You can talk to the pilot, you can talk to the navigators, or you can talk to anybody you want.
Rudy, you mean it touched the esophagus?
It touched the side of your throat.
The trachea.
Well, right on the soft part, right in here.
Okay.
And
interesting.
When when you speak into it, the sound comes up perfect. I mean, when you listen to it, just like if we were talking normally, like on a telephone conversation. And when you're flying and you want to get in contact with someone, like I did a couple of times, I wanted to find. It was so cold, and I wanted to find out how cold it was. I talk on the throat mic, and I talk to the navigator because he's flying in the nose gun in the front of the ship, and I ask him how cold it was, and he would say it's 60 below zero, and that's the way I would find out how cold it was. And when I was like in this one particular moment when I hollered out, fighters, I pressed the mics on my throat, and I pressed the button so they could hear me, because there's a little button that you squeeze to transmit. And when I did, I squeezed it, and I said, "Fighters!" It's an automatic reflex. You just do it. I mean, you don't stop and think, "I gotta press a button." You're already trained that you know what you have to do. So I pressed the button, because I saw these fighters, and then the pilot asked me, he said, "How many fighters?" And I told him, from what I can see, there's about 25 or 30 fighters in a group, and I let him know how many fighters are attacking us. So then that way you alert the crew, and where are they coming from? They're coming down at about 9 o'clock high. In other words, they're coming above us, and in the form of a clock. Where is 9 o'clock? Well, that's where you see the fighters coming from at night, in that direction. If you say 6 o'clock, they're coming from the tail. 12 o'clock, they're coming from the front of the ship. 3 o'clock, they're coming from the other side. So that's the way you communicate. You know exactly where to look for them, if they're coming above or below. And the thing is that they had the Germans used to try to attack coming in from the sun, so, because that way they, they're trying to look up into the sun. You're blinded, you can't see them, and they can see you. But then again, they also used to come through, and then after a while, we were pretty much alerted to which way they were coming from. And we used to do pretty well in defending, coming in on a direct attack. And another way they came in, they used to attack from the back. They used to come in from the below, and anywhere from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, they would come in and come up towards you and would fire their rockets at you, and then they would peel off. So
rockets they used?
Yeah, they had rockets, yeah. And they had 20 millimeter cannon shells that they used to shoot at you. And they experimented with the rockets were not so effective because you could see them, and you could take evasive action from when they used to fire rockets at you. They had to be at a pretty good distance, 2,000, 3,000 yards away. They had to go ahead and get parallel to our altitude, and when they fire the rockets, and we would see them, and we would tell the pilot, it says, rockets coming in at 3 o'clock, whatever it is, and so they're coming, they're level, they're straight across. So then they just, the whole formation would just sort of drop down about 200 feet, and the rockets would go over our heads. So then that's the way we communicated. We used to see the fighters, and I used to connect with Benny. I said, Benny, do you see those things down there? He said, they're coming in from 6 o'clock, I talked to the ball gunner, so he'll know in what position to point his guns, because he's swirling around, he's looking in every direction, and if he doesn't spot them from where they're coming from, and I see him, then I alert him to the fact where they're coming from.
Did the rockets leave trails?
Well, yeah.
You could see the trail.
You could see like a contrail, yeah, and look.
Now, they had tracer bullets too, didn't they?
Basically, no. They did.
That would give their position.
The reason I could tell that they're firing it, and this is what used to get me, was I'm looking straight at the fighter as he's coming in. I can see the burst on the machine guns on the wings. You can see the little blast of fire coming out, and I knew they're shooting at us. And at that point, I'm shooting them, and I know he sees my fire, because my gun, like I said before, they have every fifth bullet is a tracer, and I know they're two armor piercing, so that if they do have any armor trying to protect the pilot, which they did on the bottom of the seat of the German fighters, they had the armor, but our armor piercing would penetrate. And the incendiaries, when you hit the plane, they're armor-piercing incendiaries, and when it did that, it would explode, and then the ship would go down. And like when we used to hit them, and I saw my tracer bouncing, the tracers don't have the force to penetrate. But when they hit the plane, they start ricocheting off the plane, and that the other bullets that you're firing are going in.
Right.
So that way we knew when we used to get a hit. So
when they were coming in, and say coming in out of the sun, did they come individually, sequentially, or were there more than?
No. Well, sometimes they come in one at a time, or sometimes there were two or three, and it would, because the formation is scattered out all over the sky. I mean, when we're flying, we try to concentrate our ships to get together as much as possible, because the German fighters will come not only shoot at a distance and then peel off, they will come and fly right through the formation. Several times I saw the pilot of the German pilot, and I could see the yellow spinner on the ME-109 that attacked us. They came so close and flew right underneath my bomber. I saw the nose spinner that was yellow. I saw the German crosses on the wings. It was like a bluish gray type of camouflage on the ship, and I could see the pilot's face with his oxygen mask was on. I could see his face, and as he was coming in, he came in so fast, and as soon as he disappeared underneath me, I heard an explosion, and the bolt turret gunner that was underneath me, he had him in his sights all along, and he blew him up right beneath us. But that's how close they used to come.
How much evasive action could a bomber squadron take?
You can't. There's no such thing as an evasive action for a bomber. The only evasive action like that you would take would be against a flak, but then you got to go with a target. And the way the flak worked was this way: the Germans used to have so many guns around the target, and they were all set to a point where they would explode at certain altitudes. And when they got, they had guns. There were so many guns out of maybe they had several hundred guns, and maybe 700, 800, 900 guns, anti-aircraft guns. And there were maybe say 50 would fire at 20,000 feet, or maybe 100 at 21,000, at 21.5, at 23, at 24. They were scattered, so they put up a pattern over the sky. The shells bursting all over the sky at different altitudes, and that way they knew that we had to fly through it. So as you go through it and you start hearing the sound, and this is what scared the hell out of me more than the fighters, was those bursts of flak that they get so close and they sound like lightning when it hits right next to your house. It's terrific noise the explosion that happens, and it just really scared the hell out of you. And I used to sweat out the flak more than anything else. I mean, I hated the flak. Let's put it that way. I hated the flak. And even though you say, well, how long were you inside in that position? Well, by the time you enter the target area, by the time you pull out, it would be anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes. Well, I said, well, that's not very long, but it's an eternity. I mean, you stop and think, you sit there for 5 minutes and constantly, or even for 1 full minute and think. I mean, all the time you're sitting there for 1 full minute and you hear explosions all around you, 60 minutes could be an eternity. 60 seconds.
Weren't there... I'm interested in knowing more about attack strategies. Weren't there some targets that you would have to be closer to than others? Some you could...
No, the bombers?
No.
The bombers? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the bombers, everything is figured before you take off.
I see.
You're going to bomb at a certain altitude, and this is what you're going to bomb, the type of target that we're bombing. Because depending on what we were going to bomb, what kind of bombs we carried. So the use of when we carry 500-pounder, we're going after aircraft factories, we're going after oil refineries and oil storages and stuff like that.
Some targets were more heavily defended than others.
Definitely, like Ploiești oil fields in Romania, there was next to Berlin, there was the most heavily defended target in all of Europe. And another one that was heavily defended was around Vienna, Wiener where they had ball bearing factories and stuff like that. And they also had, where they used to assemble the fighters.
Rudy, what does that mean, most heavily defended? What kind of defense system?
The anti-aircraft. And anti-aircraft guns, there's a heavy concentration of flak. And also fighters. I mean, they try to defend those targets more, in force than anything else. Give you an example. In the latter part of June, for the first time that we had a fighter escort all the way to the target, because before that we did not have, our fighters were not capable of going, as far as the bombers did, and the Germans knew this, so they used to wait until we were without fighters, and then they would attack. So when you're doing that, and you hit the target, and then the fighters, start jumping, and they defend themselves, the target real strong. Like Regensburg, Wiener Neustadt, Schweinfurt, Munich, all those targets in southern Germany where was a heavy concentration of their industrial might. And so this day in the late June, we went to bomb Czechoslovakia. We bombed an oil refinery in Czechoslovakia. Her name was Bratislava. And that day, we put up 1,100 bombers in the air, combined effort that all of Europe was being bombed at the same time, from the 8th Air Force in England and the 15th Air Force in Italy. Every target in Europe was being bombed on that same day. We had 1,100 bombers all over the skies. That day, we lost 56 bombers. And the fighters, the Germans put up about 400 or 500 fighters in the air that day. And
Do you remember that day?
Yeah, it was. I think it was June the 26th. Well, the 24th. It was the latter part of June, around June 26th.
44.
1944. I could give you an exact date if I went through my missions there on my.
Germans put up how many fighters?
About 400 fighters. We spotted the German fighters when they started coming in to begin with. They started shooting rockets, and we had to. That's when you take, as far as evasive action, where you lower your altitude until the fighters, But because once you go over the target, and you're exactly over the target, the Germans do not go into the target because they can get hit by their own fire from the anti-aircraft, that is shooting up at you. So when they're doing that, the German fighters pull off and we go over the target, and then we don't have any fighter attacks. So then after you come out of the target, that's when they jump you again.
Oh, because they would come in.
Yeah, right.
Fire.
If they attack you while you're going over the target, they're going right into the same fire.
They pull out.
So they pull out.
Fascinating.
So they, that's what they did. And that day, when we bombed Bratislava, we got a hit on one of our engines and they blew it up. And I thought I was going to have to bail out because the engine shot a big flame of fire from the number one engine on the left wing.
Which one is that?
The one on the outside. The one on the outside.
Nearest the plane.
No, on the away from the plane. The outside on the wingtip. It's a 4-engine bomber, and it was the one on the. If you're flying the plane to your left, and the engine got a direct hit, or not a direct hit, but a big chunk of flak had hit it, and the gas was filling the engine, and so the flame shot. But then the pilot he feathered the engine, which means that they shut the engine off, and they turn the props to hit the wind so they won't rotate and they won't affect the plane. And at that point, the smoke started to be white smoke. Well, right there and there, when I saw that, I didn't worry so much because what the white smoke means that oil is hitting the superchargers that are hot and creating that white smoke. So then eventually the fire went out. Well, we're flying on 3 engines and we cannot keep up with the rest of the formation that's in front. They started to pull away from us, and that's when the German fighters attacked us as we're coming back out of the target. We're flying over Austria, and the German fighters attacked us. And I saw about 6 fighters that they came in at us, and I fired. We shot one of them down, but I don't know if I knocked it down. One of the guys in my crew shot it down, but I saw this one fighter that he went down in smoke. But at that moment, they made one pass at us. And then they disappeared, and I could see why, because immediately after that, I see a whole bunch of P-51 Mustangs, and they came to our rescue. And then I saw a dogfight right outside the window of the bomber, our P-51 Mustang chasing the German fighters, and I saw them chasing them going all the way down into the ground over there until they either went into the ground or they shot them down. I saw them shoot down about 2 or 3 of the German fighters, so they saved our butt that day. And after we got far enough away from the target area, and we were already flying close to the Adriatic Sea, and we're getting close to friendly territory, and the German fighters had peeled off already. They weren't attacking us anymore because the P-51 chased them away and shot some of them down. At that point, I see 2 P-51 Mustang came over and flew formation with us, and they gave us a thumbs up. And we did the same thing, and we hollered out at them, even though they couldn't hear us. Thank you, because they saved my butt that day. If it hadn't been for them, they would have shot us down.
They actually gave you a thumbs up.
Yeah, and then they tilt their wings, and then they peel off. When they know we're over safe territory. And when we came back to the base, and we went and checked the damage on the ship, we checked the engine. There was a big hole right through the engine, and there was a big hole right through the wing, right next to it. Well, you could crawl through that hole on the wing. We had quite extensive damage that day.
That is amazing.
And then when you return to base, the whole formation is flying, and the very first squadron that took off, they're the first ones to land, and you fly in formation over the base, and then they start to peel off one bomber at a time, and you're circling around and circle around until it's your turn to come in and land. And then as soon as you land, you get to the end of the runway, you come over to where you park your aircraft, and the ground crew that services the ship is right there. And then right away, they come in to inspect the ship to see for damages and what they have to do, and they get the report from the pilot, if the engines were working all right or whatever happened. And they come in inside the ship there, and they can see where I was standing at, it had nothing but all the empty rounds of ammunition, from the shells that I had fired. They're all over the ground there, So that day I had about 800 shells on the ground there. I had fired over 800. I ran out of the belt that feeds the machine gun. There's 100 rounds of ammunition, and we have about 2 or 3 boxes, 265 to each box. And as soon as you get close to the end, you right away know, in an instant you can go in there and get a pin. You pull it out, you connect the thing, you connect the other belt, so it starts feeding directly from the box. And I went through. Beside the 100 rounds that I had on original on the thing that carries ammunition to the gun, I ran out from that, and then the 265, I ran out of there. I had to hook the second one, and I ran out of that, and I finally, I tagged into the last box, and I went through about halfway. I shot about 800 rounds at the fighters that day.
Did you ever have any kills, and did you know it? Was there a way to know whether you got a kill or not?
You know to yourself that you. I know that I personally, I know that I saw him go down because my traces were hidden and it went down. But everybody in the whole bomb group, every bomber, every ship, every gunner said, no, I shot it down. Right. So there's no way to confirm it unless somebody else confirms it for you. They tell us, yeah, we saw him shoot it down.
Really, when you're coming back from these missions, there are going to be planes that don't return with you.
Absolutely.
Well, how did you deal with that, and what was that like?
Other than which had happened, I knew that some ships didn't come back because I saw them go down. One day over Vienna, on that mission that we went to Bratislava and we were on the outskirts of Vienna, I thought it was like an invasion over Vienna because so many bombers were being shot down. I counted about 100 parachutes going down. Really? So you figure 10 parachutes per crew. I mean, it's 10 bombers right there. And I all I saw was white parachutes going down. And so you know that all these bombers are not coming back. But they happen to be from a different outfit because we were flying, to one side. Our target was different. It was not over Vienna. It was just on the outskirts. And when it gets to a point like this friend of mine, when he got shot down, and I knew he was on that plane, I mean, that is what hurts because you come back and you saw him and I didn't know whether, I counted 6 parachutes that bailed out of that bomber, but I didn't know if my friend, his name was Shorty Lake, I didn't know if he was one of them. I did not know that for almost 50 years until I found out that he had bailed out. And he was a prisoner of war for almost a year. So I saw him at a reunion.
Speaking of which, what kind of training did you get for capture?
Name, rank, and serial number.
Did you have suicide kits?
No, we had. I'm glad you brought that up. Depending on where we go. Now, the Germans, people used to say that they would shoot you as you were, as you were parachuting down. The Germans they did not have that habit because they knew that they themselves could be, victims of the same thing, and because we had fighters all over the sky too.
So there was honor.
There was honor among the Germans. Now, Japanese is something else, from what I understand, but the Germans would not. However, one target that we went to was the capital of Bulgaria, Sofia. And so the Bulgarians, they were the type of person that they would execute anybody that was shot down over Bulgaria. They would execute, the prisoners. They were not keeping prisoners. So, I mean, when we went to bomb that target, I just hope that we didn't get shot down over that target.
Friendly fire. I was amazed to hear that bombers. You guys were flying so tight sometimes. You could drop bombs on your own plane. Yeah.
And what happens, the reason they do that is because when you leave the ground, you're bombing, you're assigned, you're going to be over the target at a certain time. Say you're going to get to the target and your target time is 10:57. You got 10 minutes. You got what do you call it? 10-minute deal, in order for you to go through a window there that you go through there. If you come in too early, that means that another bomb goes over the target, you're going to be under them. And if the other group is too late and you're going in and they come in, or vice versa, depend. If you're late, the other bomb group will drop bombs on you. Or if you're over there early and you drop bombs on somebody. Well, in that one case, they dropped bombs on us that I can recall. And one of them was we were bombing Trieste, which is northern Italy. It was the port of Trieste. And as we're flying over the target, the engineer, he flies the top turret. And he made the statement on the intercom, says, talking to the pilot. And he says that we got bombers right above us. He says they're opening their bomb bays. And the pilot said, well, keep your eyes on them. So he does it, in just about 5 seconds, it says they're dropping their bombs. At that instant, they were right above us, And I was looking up. I could see him too when they opened the bomb. I saw the bombs coming, as they were coming down from the bomb base, from the other bombers on top of us. At that point, my pilot made a something that the plane is not designed to do. He completely flipped the plane over on its side, and we started to lose altitude. From about 23,000 feet, we're going like that, and I could see the bombs going right by us at the same time. And we peeled off, and by the time we pulled off, we were at about 4,000 feet altitude in order to get away from those bombs. So luckily, we didn't get hit. We avoided that thing.
But see the bombs dropping?
I saw the bombs coming right by me, yeah. And then when that happens, when we flipped over on the side, and it happened that he flipped over on the side, and I'm looking straight up at the sky, and I'm hanging on to the side of the plane. In other words, instead of looking out the window, I'm looking up the window because the bomber was completely flipped over on his side, and I'm looking straight up. And the G-forces were so strong that I couldn't move. I was pinned against the side of the ship, and I was hanging on with my hands to the window, right next to the machine gun.
They were so strong you couldn't do what?
You couldn't move. You're pinned down. The G-forces keeps you pinned up against the wall. It's just like you see in the movie, on these jet planes when they take off, the forces, they shoot them backwards towards against the seat. You're going so fast.
This Trieste mission, when was that in comparison to the one with the where you fired 800 rounds? Was it before or after?
That was before.
So that was before that. That was before this.
At that point, we didn't encounter fighters. We didn't encounter fighters at every mission. The tougher missions, there was always fighters around, and depending on the target. But there were some targets that they wouldn't have no fighters because those targets were not as important, probably, like bridges or railroad yards, and the German fighter were not based that far south. They were more or less protecting their, close to home in Austria and Romania, close to Bucharest, and in Hungary, close to there, and in Munich, close to Germany. I mean, they ventured only so far out. But once we were back over here near the Adriatic, which that's where Trieste is, we never encountered fighters there.
Rudy, how often did you hit your target?
Oh, quite often. I mean, as far as that goes. But at the beginning, when we first went over there, we had, since I was not the original, the original bomb group went over in December of '43, and they didn't do their first mission until January the 8th of 1944. And in January, February, and March, you encounter a lot of winter weather, a lot of clouds over the target and stuff like that. So their missions were not that often. They were more separated, but they did fly quite a few missions, and they suffered a lot of losses during those first few months. In fact, when I went over, it was in April, and by that time, when I flew my first mission, which happened to be on Friday, April the 13th, on that day, that was the group's 44th mission. And that was my first mission. And the group went on to fly 254 missions. So you can see that we're really in the early part of operations when we were doing our missions. Because number 44 was my first mission, and my last mission was the group's 96th mission. So anything from the first 100 missions that the group flew were the toughest missions that we encountered, because it was earlier at the point where they were really started to bomb heavy during the spring and summer months.
Rudy, did you expect flak or fighters every time you went out?
You expect them every time, but not every time. We didn't get it every time.
Flak, though, every time?
Well, not necessarily.
Fire from the ground.
That's what they call flak.
Okay.
The anti-aircraft guns, as they call it, the shells that burst up in the air is flak. Not every target would shoot up a lot of flak. Because every target was, like I said, if it was only a railroad bridge, they might only have about 6 guns. 6 anti-aircraft guns that would shoot stuff up there. You won't even notice it.
Right.
It's when they shoot 400 or 500 of those things at once and the whole sky is black, it's a heavily defended target. The other ones we call milk runs, where you don't get that much, no fighters, very little flak or hardly any flak. We call those milk runs.
Did you sometimes know you were going on a milk run before you went, or?
Well, we anticipated that it probably might be a milk run. Mostly when we used to bomb Yugoslavia, we went to Belgrade, or we went to Zagreb, or we went to those targets like that were not that.
given the horrific danger on each and every one of these missions that could come from the ground and from the air and even from your own planes, did you have a prayer or any kind of a charm or anything that you took up with you?
The only thing that I had with me was my prayers. And
Special prayer?
yes, I did.
Okay.
And I used to say it in Spanish.
Great.
I used to say, when I went over the target, I used to say, Dios nos ha de cuidar y María Santísima y la sombra del Señor San Pedro nos cubra a todos.
Translate for those of us who...
What it says, Dios nos ha de cuidar, which means God, would take care of us. And also it says, Dios nos ha de cuidar y María Santísima would be in the mother of Christ. So we say, that God and María Santísima, Mary, would look after us. And for St. Peter, San Pedro, la sombra, his shadow would go ahead and protect all of us.
Where did you get that beautiful prayer?
Oh, from when I was a kid and my mother, the prayers that we learned. And I had one of those pictures of the Virgin Mary in I carried in my wallet all the time.
Where'd you get that picture?
That particular one, I got it from my dad because he went to visit me when I was in radio school in Kansas City, and he gave me that. What do you call them? Those, like those announcements they give when.
Card? A holy card?
Yeah.
This prayer, did you get that prayer from your mom?
Yeah. Because I used to hear her say, my mother used, as part of that prayer, my mother used to use it all the time, especially when she was afraid of lightning and thunder when we were kids back in Texas, and I could hear her say that when the thunder, oh Dios mío, Dios nos ha de cuidar y María Santísima. My mother used to say it all the time. And then she would say, when we were in a Dios nos ha de cuidar y la sombra de San Pedro nos cubra todas. In other words, she used to elaborate that when we were in danger, for the shadow of St. Peter would, cover us and protect us.
That's just great.
And we have a breakdown of the crew. There was 3 Catholics there. I was a Catholic. The engineer, Phil Rizan, he was a Catholic. And the navigator, James Carlson, he was a Catholic. We had Benny Yedlin, he was Jewish. He was a ball turret gunner. And we had one Southern Baptist, which was Jack Cox. He was from Tennessee. And the other ones were not Presbyterian. They were one was a Presbyterian, and 2 of them were Episcopal. See, I know the breakdown of everything. I remember everybody's religion.
Well, I'm wondering if they had their own prayers or things that they were doing.
Well, I don't know. We never discussed that. But we did have services aboard there at the base in Italy. Which we lived in tents. We had an outside mass that was said. It happened to be the Catholic priest, And I went to confession there one time, and there and out in the open, It's kind of funny having to tell him all the dirty things you did, face to face. Who you tell the priest, you can hide behind the confessional.
Oh, you did? Oh, you didn't have a...
No, I said, no, it was just back and forth, You had to confess all your sins to him. And you just tell yourself the things sometimes, your thoughts, you think something bad. He says, whatever happened,
Which reminds me, how often did you have religious services? Was it before every mission or after, or...?
Every Sunday. It was usually, the services were held on a Sunday. We had a chaplain that was there available at all times. And you did ask a question about we have any counseling in case for people, they got shook up, because we did have people that would come back from missions that were in shock, and they had to be taken, off the crew, and they went into with the medics. The only thing that they used to give us, because as soon as we landed and we got together, they pick us up in a truck, and we used to go to one of the hangars, and they had set up for every crew and you sit down on boxes or on a can or something, and we started getting debriefed. There's from G2, which is intelligence, an officer from there. He debriefs everybody on the crew, listening. What did you see? Did you see anybody get shot down? What kind of fighters? How was did you see any result? What did you see? And they debrief you in every respect. Hey, was anybody hurt? Did you see any planes go down? How many parachutes did you see going down? They debrief you down to everything. And at that point, it's, the Red Cross has a wagon there with donuts, coffee and donuts for us. So that's the first thing that you get. So as soon as that is over with, and we turn our equipment in, the parachute and your heated suit, you turn it in, and then you go eat. And after we go have something to eat, and as soon as we come out, there's an officer there from the medics waiting for you to come out, and they give you a double shot of whiskey for your nerves.
Who gave you that?
The medics, the medical officer. In this case, he used to be a captain. He was right outside the door of the mess hall. And every time you came out, he had a list of all the crews. He said, "What crew are you with?" And we tell him, "Lieutenant Rogers' crew." And he would check off your name, You identify yourself, and they give you a double shot of whiskey. And you used to get it on your coffee cup, you put it in there. And we used to take it back to our tent over there, and we had bottles, a fifth of whiskey bottles. When we started, were empty, and we used to pour the 2 shots of whiskey in the bottle. We really used to take it. We used to save it until we went to R&R, and then we really got polluted then. But you can understand that they used to give you the whiskey for your nerves so you relax. Because, give you an example, when you first get into a fighter situation, and you're so busy fighting and shooting the machine gun, and you ask, were you scared? Were you nervous? You don't have time to do that. You're actually doing what you have to do. After the fighters leave, and you start to relax, and you sit back on a can or whatever, you're sitting inside the bomber, you're heading back to the base, you're away from enemy territory and all that. And after the fighters leave, and what you do feel is that you start to feel the shakes a little bit from the tension that has been built up in you. Then you start to relax, and that's where your body starts to quiver a little bit.
Out of curiosity, do you remember if it was American bourbon or?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, oh yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
That was good bourbon. That was smooth.
All right, good. Did you guys ever request in flight on a mission that it be called off either for weather or because of intense flight?
No, not because of the conditions of the flag. The missions were called off directly from the base, which says cancel the mission because there's cloud cover, and you will not be an effective deal, bombing deal. So it happened on one mission that the day before I arrived there, they called the mission off, but my bomb group, my squadron did not get my bomb group. Actually, there were 28 bombers in the air that day, and they did not get the message. And as a consequence, 100 fighters attacked the 28 bombers. They shot down 7 bombers. They shot down over 40 German planes, fighter planes that day. And we got a unit citation for that day because of, but that's what happened, Other days we were already halfway up the Adriatic, going over into Italy, northern Italy, and going towards Germany. And then we get a message, cancel the mission and drop your bombs in the ocean. And we used to see the bombs go. I don't know how many fish we killed, but they hit the water. You see the big explosions in the ocean, But that was not the case. Individually, I came back. We did not return to the base 3 different times. One time we were going over into Ploeste. We had engine trouble, and we couldn't keep up with the formation, and we were in a process of almost losing another engine. So the pilot decided, he says, we go, see, when you're flying over enemy territory, there's no communications. There's communication inside the ship, but there's no communication between a bomber to bomber or a bomber to the home base or anything. It's all radio silence. So at that point, the pilot decides he can continue, which in that case, that's what we did. I mean, we couldn't continue. So he dropped the bombs in a field. Some farmers are probably cussing the hell out of it still,
Right.
But I don't know how many cows we killed. Anyway, we turned around and came back to the base. So that was one of the times we had to come back because we had engine problems.
But you never had to say, we cannot, that we're getting too much flack.
No, no, because of the target condition. No way. You go through hell or high wire. You go through and do what you have to do.
Okay.
Like that one time, there was one of the worst missions that I went through was at the Ploeste oil field. That we went through the target twice. We bombed it. They didn't drop the bombs, and says, I mean, I can remember that like it just happened yesterday. We went through the target and we didn't drop the bombs. I said, what the hell are they waiting for? They wouldn't drop the bombs. I was watching the other bombers through the window, and their bombs are still in there, and I didn't see them drop. And we go through the flak. I mean, that was horrible, the flak. I mean, it was so accurate. They were so close, I thought we were going to get shot down. And gradually, the flag starts to, taper off, and we're flying away from the target. And I said, what the hell? We didn't drop the bombs. So all of a sudden, here we go. We made a turn, and here we're going back right into the flak, and the whole thing started all over again. We went through the target twice because somebody failed to drop the bombs. And it just raised all kinds of hell with it. We lost a whole bunch of bombers that day. And that day, because of that, the formation scattered, and we broke up. Everybody was on his own. We wind up flying by ourselves, and then we see another plane, and we get together with him, and then we picked up another. Finally, we picked up 6 bombers together, even though they were not from my own bomb group. And here we're flying back to Italy with complete strangers in the bomb group. But we got jumped by about 30 fighters, and they shot down 2 of the bombers. Out of the 6 of it, they shot down 2 of them, and I watched them go down in flames, and the guys bailing out, and we're shooting at the fighters, and out of those 28, 30 fighters, we shot down 10 of them, and we lost 2 bombers on that mission.
You were fighting after, you were doing missions after November 1945?
No, the war.
I think if you,
I'm
asking about the atomic bomb, if you were any mission?
Yeah, no. The missions were, like I told you, we had a quota. We do so many missions, they send you home. All right?
Good. Did you know when your last mission was?
Yes, definitely. They on that operations room. There's a board there. We're listing all the individuals that are flying, from the pilot right down to every gunner, and every single mission that you miss, it's like what do you call it? One of those architecture forms where you had little squares in it. Only they're big squares, and on each name. Every day that you fly, they color it in with a red crayon. They color in that you made another mission. And then the next one, you color it. And you keep on going down till you hit the last mission, your 50th mission, and then they color that. When you do that, you're through and you're going to come home. And that's the way you keep track of how many missions you have, even though you keep track yourself. But, officially you look at the board, and that way you can tell how many missions you have. And then when I finished my last mission was in July the 14th of 1944. And my bomb group, somebody has to replace it. There's always replacements. And people keep on coming. And by that, and a month after, in July, when I came home, a month later, Ploeste, the Russians had already taken over Bucharest and the oil field, so Ploeste was not a target anymore. So then the heavy targets past that was around Vienna and southern Germany. But at that point, our bomb group continued making bombing missions. When I left in July, the last mission my bomb group, the 449, did was in somewhere in about the 3rd week of April of 1945. Okay. And the war officially ended in May of 1945 in Europe.
So you could be on your 40th mission and you would know 2 more. I got 2 more.
Yeah. In this case, I was flying my 49th mission. And I knew that this was going to be my last mission because, see, we had a system for you. A mission is one thing, and a sortie is another one. A sortie is the actual mission itself. But they used to credit us with when we had to go so far, a certain distance away from home, anything over 500 miles was considered 2 missions, even though we only did 1. So we got credit for 2. In essence, I did 36 actual missions, and I got credited with 51.
Do you remember completing your last mission that you did?
Oh, definitely, because ironically, it happened to be my last mission was the same target as my first mission. It was over Budapest, and I have a real close recollection of that because that's when this little friend of mine got shot down. that morning when we got up and we went to briefing, and then when we were starting, left our tent to go to briefing, and this little guy, his tent was right behind me. His name was Shorty Arthur Lake. We used to call him Shorty. It was a tail gunner on another crew. And as we're leaving the tent, and I hear somebody holler, say, "Hey, Rudy, wait for me." And I turn around and I see who it is. It's Shorty Lake. And I said, "Shorty," I said, "get your ass down here," you know. So he starts running. I could see his face smiling. He's running, and he caught up with me, you know, and we're joking, and we walked to briefing. Now, on that mission, after we took off and went on that mission, and I knew which number his bomber was, and when we took off and went to the target, and before we got to the target, we saw his bomber started to straggle behind the rest of the group. And right outside Budapest, as we were coming into the target, and I saw his bomber, he was trying to skirt the target so he could join the formation later on after we went through the target. German fighters went in after him, and I saw the fighters go in and shoot him down. I counted about 6 parachutes from his plane, so I knew he had got shot down. And I just, in my mind, I said, "Damn it," you know. And Shorty, that happened to be his 44th mission, because he had told me. And this happened to be my last mission, and we had discussed that on the way to briefing. So then, after that happened, you know, I mean, we got over the target and fighting, getting through the flags, and then we come out, and I looked to see if, you know, what happened, and his plane had disappeared. They got shot down. And then coming all the way back, and I got on the intercom, and I told the rest of the guys that knew, the ball turret gunner, the tail gunner, and I told them, I said, "Benny, are you listening? Cox, are you listening? Simon, are you listening?" You know, because they're the different turrets, and they all say yes. He says, "That was Shorty Lake who got shot down over there." You know, I told them who it was. And when we landed, I walked over to the crew chief, Whitey, and I told him, I said, "Don't wait for him. He says, they're not coming back." It was very sad, you know, being my last mission. I was happy, but at the same time, you know, that's the mission where I told Benny, "Get off." You know, he's the one that owned a good camera. He says, "Get off and take a picture of me," you know, when I leave the plane. So I got up in the window, and that's when he caught me jumping out the window. It looked like I'm bailing out. And then he took another picture of me when I'm hugging the ground, because it was my last mission. 3 days later, I shipped out to come home.
3 days?
Yeah.
It was over in a hurry.
Yeah. And ironically, this is a story that transpired. You wonder about how you get your rank. Every month you get your pilot turns you in so you can get another stripe. You know, every position, every gunner. You know, when they get out of gunnery school, they become what they call buck sergeants. You know, 3 stripes, and then they're 1 stripe shy of their top grade, which is staff sergeant. For the engineer and the radio med, you get to be tech sergeant, which is what I became. So on that first of the month, I was supposed to be put in for my stripe, but my pilot failed to put me in. He didn't put my name in to be, so when the list came out of all the guys that got, you know, up to tech sergeant, like the engineer in my crew, he got his tech sergeant, and I didn't get mine. And I went to race out with my pilot, but I couldn't find him. He had an appendectomy. He had an operation, and he was in the hospital. And I had gone to my operations officer, Captain Easters, and tell him that I wanted to get out. I didn't want to fly with that pilot anymore. That I wanted to get away from him, fly with another crew. So that's when he gave me the news, you know, that my pilot was in the hospital. That we were going to get a substitute pilot, which we did with Lieutenant Holland, and so we finished the missions together. Anyway, when I didn't get my stripes, so when I finished my missions, I went down there to a group, to the operations, and I talked to this corporal. His name was McFarland, and he lived in San Francisco, and I got to know him pretty well. And I told him, says, "Hey, Mac," be McFarland, we call him Mac. "Hey, Mac," I said, "do me a favor." He said, "Well, what is it, Rudy?" I said, "Look," I said, "my pilot didn't turn my name in for for my, to get my next stripe. And if I finish my missions and I leave here, says, I don't think I'll ever get my other stripe. Do me a favor, will you put in that form, you're the one that types them out, and you send them in. Will you fill the one out for me? And I'll personally take it, up the ladder. So he did. He filled it out, there's, recommend this, Staff Sergeant Rudy Acosta be, given a tech sergeant rank and so forth. What do you call it? The form that you have to fill out.
Right.
So then I took it to Captain Easters, and he asked me who my pilot was, and I told him, and so he signed it. And then I walked at the group, and I turned it into to Colonel Gent, which is the guy in charge of the whole 449th bomb group. And I turned it into him, and I told him that my pilot had gone to the hospital and that I did not get my stripe. The day before I shipped out, the orders came out, I got my next stripe. I put myself in to get an increase in rank, and I got my next stripe. So before I left overseas, I got my tech sergeant.
But no, at some point, at some point, did you begin to, or did you ever experience racist attitudes, or?
Not until I came back.
Oh, it wasn't until you came back.
Yeah.
That's where we are now. Do you remember your first day back?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the process, because to begin with, after my last mission, I had to spend 30 days in Naples because they're having the invasion of southern France at the time, and all the ships, no ship was available. They were using that for all the troops that were going ashore in southern France on the invasion. So after that, and all the ships were released, and I finally got aboard ship, it took me 13 days to get from the time we left the port in Naples. And we went through the Mediterranean, went through the coast of Africa, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and over to the ocean. And we started picking up ships as we came down the line, and we were in a convoy. There was 25 ships in the convoy, including about 6 destroyers to protect us against German submarines. So I arrived in New York on September the 1st. It took us 13 days to sail from Naples, Italy, to the time we docked in New York. And from there, I took a troop train. It took me 5 days across country to California, to Monterey, California, where I got my furlough, and I came home. And then from there, after that, I took my next assignment. I went to Scottsville, Illinois, for a refresher course, which we didn't need. They didn't know what to do with us at that time. And then I wind up being sent to Florida. I went to Boca Raton, Florida, which was a training school for bombardiers and navigators on radar bombing and radar navigation. And being a radio operator, they need a radio operator and an engineer in order to fly the plane. The plane won't get off the ground without either one of them. So I was stationed down there for 7 months. And during that time that I was there, I started dating a girl from the base there. She was a whack, and she was a real cute girl. And we had a lot of fun for about a month. We went to the dances on the base and all that stuff like that. Then I had a date with her that we were going to meet in town, and we were going to hit the town because I knew all the nightclubs in town. And she stood me up. I said, I wonder what the hell happened to Martha, So anyway, I didn't see her for a week, almost 2 weeks. And we always used to everybody used to go to the NCO club for the dances on Wednesdays and Saturday nights and the other days. But on Wednesdays and Saturday nights, we had a band that used to play, and the other night we had the jukebox. So I saw one of her girlfriends, and I asked her, I says, what happened? I said, hey, what happened to Martha? I said, we had a date, and she stood me up. Oh, you don't know, she told me? No, don't know what? Well, she found out you were a Mexican. So what does it have to do with it? Well, she's from Galveston, Texas. And I said, well, that makes sense. It would be a Texas, deal, and because she all of a sudden she realized that I realized that I was a Mexican, she wouldn't have nothing to do with me. And that was the first form of discrimination that I really encountered, because up to that point nobody had ever even bothered to ask you where you were from, or what color you were, or what religion, nothing. I mean, you were just one of the guys. I mean, no discrimination at all. So it just so happened at that particular time that we were shipping out from there. I mean, it was towards the end of my service, because I was flying submarine patrol there. We were flying those B-17s with a radar navigation and radar bombardiers and training. And we used to fly over to Havana and up to the Bahamas and up and down the coast. We were flying submarine patrol at the same time that we're doing the training. And that's the reason we were down there. So then the war ended in May, and at that point they started making, as when all this happened, and they shipped us all out, and I wound up in Lubbock, Texas. And that's where I first encountered the discrimination.
What do you mean?
Well, in Lubbock, Texas, there was for the first time, of all the time that I had been in the service, this happened over the last 2 months when I was in the service, that I finally came across some other Mexican guys that were in the Air Force. They were working in the motor pool, and they were one of them was a truck mechanic, and so there was this guy El Alvarez, and this guy Kid Gallegos, and the other guy was Manuel Martinez. The three of them and myself were the only Mexicans there. So we got together the first weekend we were there. We went into Lubbock downtown there because we heard a lot about the Cotton Club and all the fun that we used to have, in that club. That's what the word the rest of the guys used to say. It's a great place to go dancing. So we went to the nightclub and we sat down. It was about 10:30, and the band started to play, and there was hardly anybody around. There was about 3 tables over across the way from where we were sitting. There was a real nice-looking girl sitting over there. So I said, well, that's great music. I want to dance. So I got up and I went and asked one of the girls at the table to dance, and she refused. So then I asked one of the other girls. They refused. None of them wanted to dance. Well, I went back and sat down, and as soon as I sat down, I see somebody else go out, and right away they got up to dance. And all of a sudden it dawned to me, and I told these other guys, you know what? These girls don't want to dance with us is because we're Mexican. That's obvious. So I said, the hell with, let's get the hell out of here. So we left, and we go back to our base. And we went, because at the base we had a NCO club where we also had band and music and a jukebox, and we used to go down every night, drink beer and party. And that was towards the end of the war, so we were getting ready to get out of the service. The war with Japan was not over yet, but at that point when we were there, when they dropped their first atomic bomb, we knew it was just a matter of a few weeks. So anyway, on the base there, the other Mexican kids and myself, Martinez and Gallegos, we went to town, and right on the corner of Texas State University, across there was a baseball field where we used to have baseball. Every Monday night there was baseball games there, where the field had a softball team, and they used to play other teams around the area there. And so right down the street was a Catholic church, about 2 blocks down the street there from the church. Across the baseball field was on one side of the university across the street, and on the other corner there was a restaurant right on the corner. So we went to church, and when we went to church, this was a little bit of upper middle class type of people because they were wearing all kind of real nice clothing. They had furs and wool dress, all Anglos, every one of them. And when we went into the church, the look they gave us, like I said, what are these guys doing here? And we were all in uniform, so I could tell the stares, So we went in. And after the mass, then we came out. The priest is out there, when people shake his hand and they just hi and so forth. When I came out, I did this on purpose, because of the other people that were on there. I went up to the priest and he didn't hand me his hand. I grabbed it, and I shook his hand and I told him, I really enjoyed your sermon, Father. Oh, thank you right away. He couldn't get rid of my hand fast enough. So I could tell right away about the looks of the people, how they felt. So then we walked back 2 blocks down to the corner across the university there, where the restroom was there. And we walked into the restaurant and sat down at the counter. We were going to have breakfast. And there was nobody in there except one person was sitting at one of the tables. And at the counter, there was nobody except us. There was a waitress, and there was a lady and an old man there, behind the counter. Near the kitchen, the counter there where they hand the food over. Excuse me. So the waitress kept on going back and forth, and right in front of us. And I find out, I say, hey, come over here. Come on, how about some service? She looked at me and she just turned around and ignored me. She came back through there and I said, hey, what's the matter with you? I said, come on. I said, we're ready to order. She ignored us. I hollered at the man over there. Evidently, he was the owner, and probably his wife, they were owners. And I told him, I said, hey, how about some service over here? He looked at me, and he turned his face and ignored me. At that point, some other people came in and sat down at the table. Immediately, they went and served them. So I told these guys, you know what? These assholes here, they don't want to give us any service because they said, we're Mexican. So we left. And went back to the base. It was Sunday. The next morning, I went to talk to Captain K.K. Turner. He was our CO. And when we first arrived there, and we had a meeting in the auditorium there at the theater, and they had told us that we didn't, for whatever reason we could think of, he says, you guys are stuck here until you get out of the service. You're not going any place. We have thought of everything. He says, you're stuck. All right. So when I went that morning, being the other guys, we went in and requested to see Captain K.K. Turner. And so we went in and he said, now what's the matter with you guys, he told us. He was a hell of a good guy. He was a lawyer in civilian life before he became there. So he was everybody really liked him. And so I told him, excuse me, sir, but he said, we would like to request a transfer. He says, what do you mean a transfer? He said, did you guys hear when you first arrived about you can't leave here under any circumstances? So I said, excuse me, sir, but I think you guys missed one. He said, well, what do you mean? So then I told him about the discrimination and what had happened at that restaurant. He said, son of a bitch, he said, I never thought about that. He said, you're right. He said, we never thought about that. So I'll tell you what, he says, look, I can arrange to have you guys transferred if that's what you want. But I want you to consider one thing. If you stay here in about 2 or 3 weeks on the number system that you're getting discharged, you probably have enough points in order to get out in 2 or 3 weeks. But if I transfer you wherever you go, by the time all your papers catch up to wherever you're going and you ship out, he said, you're liable to be in the service for at least six more months. So take your choice. You want me to transfer you, or you want to stick around for a couple of weeks? I said, well, under the circumstances, it says, we'll stick around. So that night, when they had the baseball game, we went to see the baseball game, and across the street, we looked at the restaurant. They had refused us service that morning on the previous day, and there's a sign as big as probably a big old sign that I would say is at least about 6 or 8 feet high and about 15 feet long, with a great big sign that says off limits to all military personnel. Because of what they discriminated against us, they had completely put it off limits. And that was we went across the street and we laughed at the guy, the old man. His wife was standing in the front of the restaurant, and I pointed to the sign and I pointed at them and said, now what, you idiots, this is what you get. I told him, I said, this is what you get. Is this what you want? It's what you get. It says, because they used to get a lot of service from the military personnel, and not only at my base, but there was another base on the other side of town where they had cadets, and they also had the ROTC right across the street at the college. They had a lot of business over there.
Where was the sign?
Right in front of the restaurant. Right on the restaurant is there, and they had a little lawn. There was a walkway going to the restaurant. And to one side, there was a little grass. And right in there, they dug the holes, they put the poles, and put the sign up, facing catty corner towards the college and towards my commander,
That's wonderful.
Major K.K. Turner.
That's a great story.
See, so that's what happened for discriminating.
That is a fantastic story.
And I also had another experience on discrimination there when I told Maggie about this. When I went to the show by myself there in Lubbock, in fact, I remember the picture of Dorian Gray was playing. I remember that movie. And I went in and I went up to the balcony because you could smoke in the balcony. And I sat down over there in the middle of the balcony. And the usher comes over and there's only I can't sit there. I said, what are you talking about? He said, get out of here. No, you can't sit there. He said, where do you want me to sit? You're supposed to sit over here on the other side over here. And what's the difference between the here? Well, I said, because this is where the Mexicans sit. I said, you son of a bitch, get the hell out of here. So when he got the manager, and the manager came over and told me, I says, I couldn't sit there. I said, well, he said, you're going to have to throw me out. He says, the only way you're going to throw me out is that you get some MPs out there coming here. He says, let's see whose side they're going to take. So they dropped it and they left me alone, and I sat there and watched the movie.
Was that also in Lubbock?
Yep, in Lubbock.
Yeah, I think Lubbock is still that way, by the way.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. The population was 30,000 at the time, and now it's up there in the over 100,000. I know that. So,
I mean,
but
I've just heard and seen things in Texas
yeah.
that are just awful recently. It's still...
yeah, Texas is the biggest area of discrimination against the Latin people. I mean, because that's obvious, you know.
Right.
Even though when I was in grammar school there before I came to California and for 5 years I went to school there, I really didn't. We never did suffer discrimination because there were so many of us there. I guess that they just didn't do that. Even though I did have a teacher that hated my guts. In fact, he flunked me, my English teacher, and the reason she flunked me not because I failed. Because I used to sit right in front of her in her desk, and I was in the front row. There were double rows of seats, and I had a girl that sat next to me. She was one of a pair of twins. Her name was Zella, her sister Della. And Zella used to sit to me. She was kind of a dorky type of girl. That she wasn't very clever and very smart. She used to copy everything that I did, and all the tests, everything else. When the grades came out, the teacher flunked me, and she got equal to a C+. And when she saw that she flunked me, said, Rudy says, why did she do that? How come she did that? You know, I couldn't figure it out. And then it dawned to me also, because after that one deal that happened, and whenever I wanted to go to the bathroom, I would ask the teacher her name. I never forget her name. Her name was Miss Lyles. And I asked her, I said, may I go to the bathroom? She would let me go, but she wouldn't let nobody else go. And I was wondering, I said, maybe I'm privileged or something. So then one day, I was kidding, and I was telling Zella, that how could I go to the bathroom? He said, don't you know why? I said, no, why? Well, as soon as you leave the room to go to the bathroom, I said, she starts degrading you and belittling you and calling you all kinds of names in front of the class. You say that little Mexican guy, this and what. She started to really, lay it on like that. So after that, I said, well, I didn't know that. This was in the 5th grade. And so I was about 12 years old. So then the 11 going on 12. So then when the teacher, I wouldn't ask to go to the bathroom anymore. She had the guts to say, Rudy, would you like to go to the bathroom? And I said, no, ma'am. I won't give her the satisfaction. See, so you can see the discrimination. I witnessed it, but one thing about all this discrimination that went on, I had more common sense and more what do you call pride and more. I would say more intelligence. I'm not going to lower myself to their level. Anybody that discriminates against anybody that way, they think they're better than you are. They say, I'm not going to lower myself to their standards. And that's been my interpretation of discrimination anywhere I went. If anybody wants to go ahead and say that they think they're better than I am, say they got another thing coming because I'm not going to lower myself to their level.
Rudy, describe your first few days home.
Well, right after this, a few days, a couple of weeks later, I shipped out. I had enough points, and I came home. I came to San Bernardino over here at Northern Air Force Base, and I swear they gave me my walking papers. I got discharged, and I took a bus home, and I get home where we were living, and I knocked on the door. The door was locked, and I knocked on the door. And my sister Cello, she came to the door. Oh, she was so happy to see me, and then my mother was right behind her. And then my brother Bill, the one that had been gone, he was in the overseas for 33 months. He was in the infantry, and he had been wounded, and he had gotten his discharge in August. And he came home and got discharged. So he was home already, and so when I got home, then I was out of the service, that everybody hugging everybody and having, it was a great feeling, But when I got there and I got to the corner, on East LA, we were living on Pleasant Street at the time, almost at the corner of Boyle and First Street. When I got off the bus, they used to come, instead of going all the way to downtown LA, I got off there on Macy Street at the junction of Brooklyn and Macy, where they cross. Yeah. So I got off there in Mission, the bus used to come down Mission, and when Brooklyn used to turn into Macy, the name of the street there. Mm-hmm. So I got off there, and I walked home because it was about, I would say maybe half a mile. But I couldn't wait to get home. I didn't want to go all the way downtown. So I unloaded my couple of bears bag and I just put them over my shoulder and I walked home with them. So, it was a great feeling.
There were all those hugs and everything, and as I can't even imagine, but but at night you were alone. You're laying there in bed, and I just wondered if you were replaying the horrific things that you saw and experienced. Did it bother you at all?
No, it never left my mind. To this day, it has never left my mind. Okay. That's why I remember everything, because every single day for the over 50 years, 56 years, since everything that I went through, I remember it like if it happened yesterday. I remember things when I was a kid like yesterday. I remember things that happened yesterday, in between, 10 years ago, no matter what it is. Everything, the jobs that I did and everything, I remember everything. I just had to have that capacity to remember, and I never did feel any after effects, you might say, that affected me. And one thing that we skipped over there, how did I feel as far as when you used to go fly these missions? Did you feel scared, or what did you feel when you were going to go on a mission? Actually, we had just been on a mission, and you come after the mission, you go and check. You go eat, you come back and you clean up, and then you go about 7 or 7:30. That's when they start posting the missions for the next day. We walk over there to see if you're flying. If you're flying, your name's on the board, so you know you're flying. Then we come back to our tent and we sit down when we're playing cards, or we go ahead and just shoot the bulls. By 9 o'clock, lights out. We had a kerosene lamp. We didn't know electricity. Kerosene lamp. We shut it off. Everybody hit the sack. I was asleep in 10 seconds. I never worried about what next day. I never entered my mind.
Wow.
So,
did you feel changed?
Oh, definitely. I think world-wise, wisdom and knowledge-wise, anything else, I think I aged 10 years in knowledge in those 3 years that I was in. Because I don't think that if it hadn't been for the experiences that I went through in every place that I went through, from the very beginning to radio school and on to gunner school and on to combat experience, and coming back and stationed in Florida and stationed in Lubbock and all the places that I was stationed in, and all the things that I witnessed and everything that I saw, I would never would be able to learn them if I would have stayed home in just a closed environment, a little shell, you might call it, and just a family, So.
But Rudy, in World War II in France, I remember reading once of how the French resistors, during the German Nazi occupation,
Mm-hmm.
they lived in secret. They did
the underground, they call that.
But my point is, they, like you, had a period in their life of 2 or 3 years which was extremely intense, extraordinarily intense, unnaturally intense. Yeah, right. And for some of them, I read once that life was boring after that. For the rest of their lives, it was never that exciting. And some of them had psychological depression over that, and they never, I know that might sound odd, but...
No, but that's true, because I've had second thoughts. Since then, and even up to now, I always wish that I had stayed in. Because if we stop to reflect back on what I was doing and what... I was a tech sergeant, I was on flight status. I was making, with my flight pay, I was making $171 a month. And when I got out of the service and I went to work for $1 an hour, I was making $40 a week, $160 a month. I was making less money. And while I was in the service, they used to give me clothing, they used to give me food, they used to have my medical, and I didn't think about those things. And if I would have stayed in, I had an option. I could have requested to go into the ATC, the Air Transport Command, which means I would have been flying, transport from usually headquarters was in Reno, Nevada. I would have been flying to the Hawaii, over to the Orient, and then during that deal that they had in Germany. Remember when the Russians, blockade Berlin, and we were flying in all kinds of supplies. I would have been involved in that in an Air Transport Command, and I would have been able to experience a lot of things more and make more money. I was making more money, and I could have stayed in. At the end of 20 years, then by that point I could have retired from the service. But I've had second thoughts about that over the years, but it just wasn't meant to be.
What did you do when you rejoined the workforce? How did you rejoin?
Well, I was working for Lockheed when I went in, and I went back, and it was like a morgue. All the hustle and bustle, and when I went back, there was only 1 or 2 guys working there. There was nothing going on, so I only worked a couple of weeks there, and I was working the night shift, and I had to take a bus. I had to walk to the bus at 10 o'clock at night and get on the bus so I could get to the plant at midnight in Burbank. And when I used to get home in the daylight about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. And it seemed like all I ever did was sleep and get up and go to work, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So I quit working at Lockheed. I had experiences after that. I drove a yellow cab for a couple of months. I delivered ice. I dug ditches. I did all kinds of menial jobs as far as that goes, just trying to get back on my feet. And finally, I started to get a job in this U.S., what do you call them, peerless pumps. They were part of Food Machinery Corporation. It was the subsidiary of that company, and we used to build all kinds of pumps. I worked there for several years. And then until when I got married, and then I quit. For a couple of years, I was an insurance agent, and I didn't care for that type of life of being white collar worker and having to work evenings to get people at home. I didn't appreciate that, so I quit, and I went back to the machine shop where I had left the job before, and I went back to work there. And while I was there, then I happened to get a neighbor that was working in construction, and he dared me to go and see if I was capable of doing what he used to do. So I did. I took a leave of absence for a couple of weeks, and I went and worked with him and found out that not only that I could handle, I even did the job better than he did. So I started working in construction for the next 25 years. And then when my boss died, I was 59 years old when he died. I was the superintendent for this construction company. And when the boss died, his wife did not want to continue the business. She liquidated everything, and I'm out in the street, so that means I had to start all over again. So I'm too old to get hired to do practically any kind of work when you're almost 60. So at that point, I was able to get my pension from the carpenters. I got a pension from them, and I started doing side jobs. And then at that point, when my brother was working at a racetrack, and I started working at the racetrack part-time, and then a couple of years I was working full-time, and I've been there 18 years.
Which racetrack?
Santa Anita. And also work at the fair every year.
What do you do there?
Nothing really. I mean, it's a shame that I had to...
Really?
It's a shame that I had to stick up my hand and collect my check, but what you do is just stand there, and if you came to the racetrack and I'm right there at the escalator going up to the box seats, or you're going into the clubhouse, you have to come through me in order to get in. You show me a hand stamp, and as long as you got a hand stamp, you can go in.
All right, Rudy, when you leave that job, I might want to replace you.
You'd be surprised. I mean, there's a waiting line. Huh?
And, okay, we're nearing the end. I have a few more questions. In the late 60s, of course, East LA and Lincoln Heights and that whole area was racked by racial conflict, even rioting, and student walkouts. There was a sense that Latinos were being unfairly sent to war. We were fodder for the country. You saw all that. What was going through your mind at that time?
To tell you the truth, it really didn't. It didn't affect me, or I didn't dwell on that on any of that stuff. Like anything else, there's always going to be, like there is now, where a minority will always suffer indignation, discrimination, and all that stuff. But it's up to the individual to rise above it, and that's what I did. I mean, I rise above that because I will not lower myself to anybody. If I went to a place and I worked, and then if they didn't like me, they pushed me around, and they let me know that maybe they didn't like me or whatever it is. They says, I was looking for a job when I found this one. Says, you can shove it, and I take off and I'll go find me another job, which is I did it many times. If I didn't like the way they treated me, I just go someplace else. I'm not going to go in there and demand that you treat me equal to anybody else. The hell with you. I don't have to work for you.
Right.
And that's been my attitude. I mean, I never dwelled on the people discriminating, and to this day, the first word that come out of people, right away they raise the finger about discrimination, and I says you gotta get intelligent and educated enough to rise above that.
Did you take a stand on Vietnam, though?
I was against the war itself. the way it progressed. At the beginning, it was one thing when they shut down some of our planes. We're out there helping this country. But as things started to develop, and I saw that there was a war that could not be won. It was they called it a police action, and we're losing people left and right. In fact, my wife lost one of her cousins. He got killed in Vietnam. And to me, I felt sorry in a way for the people that had to go to Vietnam, because there was a war. Like my wife's brother, he was in the Marines, and he served 2 tours in Vietnam. And he was lucky. He was a gunner on one of those helicopter gunships, and but he survived, and he never got hurt. But there was a war that was, even to this day, everybody now they admit that it was a mistake to begin with. Right. But that's what happens in our country, like the thing was happening right now with this election, and we got to get over that. No matter what happens, it's going to end. It's something else. Another cycle begins, no matter what it is.
When did you marry, and how did you meet, and how many children do you have?
Well, I got married in 1954, in February of 1954. I had met my wife several months before that. We met at Olvera Street. We used to go to the same place there to dance and have fun.
Boy, those nightclubs keep popping in life all the way through.
Well, I wish things were like they were then, because today I cannot fathom going to one of the disco places they have nowadays. To me, that's not a nightclub. In those days, they wouldn't even let you go into a place and go dance if you were not wearing a suit and a tie. Nowadays, you can go barefoot for all they care. So, that's an entirely different generation.
It's true.
So anyway, that's where I had met my wife, and at the very first time I was introduced to her, I paid no attention to her. To me, she was just somebody else. But several weeks later, she cut her hair to a short hair, and it wasn't the same person at all, and I didn't even recognize her, that it was the same one that I had been introduced to. I remember the first time I was introduced to her, what she was wearing, that low cut dress she was wearing. It was black, and she had long hair. And therefore, the next time I see her, she was wearing a short skirt, a regular, and she was wearing, I think, a little sweater or something, one of those little dressy sweaters. And her hair was cut real short, and she looked entirely different, So when one day I told my brother Tony, "Is that the same Irene that I met that day?" He says, "Yeah, man, that's the same one." So at that point, I said, "I'll be damned." He says, "Well, I made it a point that I had to go back and catch her to apologize to her, because it wasn't that I wanted to ignore or anything else, but it's just that I was so flabbergasted. So anyway, we did run across each other on a Sunday. She had stopped by, and I stopped by after I went to a show with a friend of mine. I took him home. It was early since I was working nights on a Monday. I could stay up late Sunday night, so I stopped by there and eating there, and she happened to be there, and I started talking to her, and I apologized for, not that I wasn't trying to be, anybody other than what I am, and I wasn't trying to snub her. And from there on, we hit it off.
How many children do you have?
I have 3, 2 girls and a boy, and my daughter, Deborah, she's the oldest. She was born in 1957. And then I have a boy, he's about 15 months different. He was born in 58 in October. Then I have a daughter that was born in, incidentally, the same date as my other daughter, on October the 13th of 1962. And she's the one that works for Dell Computers now.
Oh,
so yeah. So she's got a very good job there. So yeah.
She's doing very well.
And I have got grandchildren, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. I don't know, because my son is a wanderlust. I have no idea where he's at. I haven't seen him for a long time, and I don't know how many kids he might have delivered along the way. But my daughters, they're one of them here, Deborah. She lives in Victorville, and I got 2 grandchildren on her side there. Andrea here, who is 16 years old, and then her older sister, who's going to be 24 in December. And my other grandson is one of Rudy's boys. He's 16 years old. And since then they were divorced, and she remarried, but we keep in close touch with her and with him. And my other daughter, she lives in Austin. She has a boy, 14 years old. He's going to be 15 next July. And we're a very close family as far as the girls are concerned. So we're have a nice relationship.
How have the lives of your children, how did the lives of your children differ from your own life as a child?
She's tremendous. I mean, you can't believe the difference. Like I mentioned before, that I wish I was back in my old neighborhood where, you know, we were safe going at night. We used to go out and go play, and we used to go to the playgrounds at night and get home around 9 or 9:30 and play with the neighborhood kids. There was never any worry about being mugged or getting knifed or getting killed or anything like that. And the morals of that generation were so different from today's morals. I mean, it's nowhere near, you know. And the thing is, the way we were raised, we were a poor family, not starving. We did. I mean, I was 16 years old before I knew what a malted shake tasted like. At school, I couldn't afford a dime to buy a hamburger that they used to sell at school. We used to pack our own lunch. So, I mean, we did without a lot of things, but after we grew up and started to work, and we started to enjoy the little things that are better in life. And since we're fortunate enough that we started to work and earn fairly decent money, and we provided a good education for my children. They all went to parochial school, and they went through Bishop Ahmad High School. They graduated from Bishop Ahmad High School. They all got we were fortunate that we could provide for them, you know, this type of education. Right. So consequently, I mean, things are so different. There's no comparison from that generation to my daughter's generation to my grandchildren. There's another difference, right? There's a big gap between generations.
That's true.
A big gap.
And what about the Mexican-American community? That's changed a lot too, hasn't it?
Well, see, here again we go into this, the entire world. When you go to East LA, you can go to East LA, or even here you go to Pomona, you go to Ontario, the section of town where the Mexican people do their shopping. There's a market right down the street over here, about 3 miles, 4 miles. It's in the Mexican section of town, Cardenas Market. It's a big supermarket type. Mm-hmm. And you go in there, and it's like walking into Mexico's, one of their mercados in Mexico, where, you know, you have all they peddle everything, you know, there. And all you see is 10% is all Mexican people, and all they speak is Spanish. And when they go and buy stuff, and he says, "This is amazing." To me, when I go there, like around Christmas time, we go buy the masa to make tamales or something like that, and I see these people. They have a meat counter that's bigger than any market on the other supermarkets. They have their own. This is about 5 times larger, and you have to get a number in order to get served because there's a waiting line of people buying meat. And the kind of groceries that they buy meat like if they're feeding an army. I can't believe it, you know, how much of the food that they buy, basket upon basket of food, you know. And by looking at them, I know that these people are not making the kind of money that other people are making, and yet this is what they do.
I have 2 last questions, and I want to thank you again for what I think has been a terrific interview, and I hope Maggie feels the same way. My 2 last questions might seem a little odd to you, but one of them has to do with courage. It's hard to imagine summoning the courage to get in that banana boat and go take flak every day, 30, 50 times. Where does one then, now, and in the future, where do you get that courage? Where can a human being get that courage from? Where does that come from?
Well, that's a very good question, you know, because every individual is different. You can, for instance, you know, people that during the Vietnam War that took off and went to Canada, I can understand, you know, that type of war. But as far as World War II was concerned, it was such a great united effort because there was, compared to what the military that we have now or any of the other wars that we have been in, people don't realize there were 16 million people in uniform in World War II, and the population was only 134 million. everything you saw on the streets was uniforms. And then the home front was united too. I mean, the women were working in defense factories, and everybody was rationed. The sugar was rationed, the coffee was rationed, the gasoline was rationed, the cigarettes were rationed. I mean, they were doing without a lot of things. And what do you call pride in your country that you have, that you went in and you believed in that what you're fighting for. All this has a lot to do with you, that no matter how high water you're going to be in there. And it happens automatic inside of you. You either have it or you don't. There's the majority of the people, when they first go into combat, they're a little timid about it. I can understand that. But once you get the first baptism of going day in and day out, you don't dwell on it. There's some people that do, and those are the people that their hair turns gray overnight, which happened to one of my crew members. When we went over, he had a little bit of gray on his temple. He was the oldest guy on the crew. He was 26 years old. And just about 4 or 5 months later, his hair was practically all white. I mean, because, see, what you feel inside. But as far as the courage is concerned, I mean, you don't stop and think, I'm so brave, I'm going to go in there and do that. To me, I compare it to when I used to go see the movies, and I see the movies about, Errol, Flynn, or John Wayne, all the, the movies, how you used to go gung-ho and you go out and fight and kill the enemy and all that, Well, in my case, I lived it. I mean, we lived that experience about going into combat and fighting. We didn't shoot it at a German plane thinking we shoot it at an individual. No, we're shooting at a plane. We're not trying to say, here, I'm going to kill you. No, I mean, you just shoot it to defend yourself.
Which brings me perfectly to my very last question, which is, why hasn't there ever been a decent, I mean, in my humble opinion, there's never been a well-made motion picture about combat in the air. It's yet to be made in my mind.
They made
World War II experience, jets.
Right. Well, they made
a good movie.
Well, did you see the Memphis Belle?
No, but I thought 12 O'Clock High was...
Well, the 12 O'Clock High, there was one movie that touched on it, and it showed some combat scenes.
But it wasn't very good.
But, no, in a sense, because when you experience what we did...
That's what I mean.
It's a different story compared to what they put in the movies, because that things are made in a different way. They did have some of most of the movies that are made about war, usually, if you notice, they're concentrated on the officers, not the rank.
Good point.
I mean, most of them are brass. People are officers, they're colonels or generals or captains, or at the least a lieutenant, but they're still basically all the stories, even the love stories, about World War II, that it's usually an officer with, and the only movie that came out that was a little bit different, right after the war, was Best Years of Our Lives with Frederick March.
Yes.
That movie was a good movie because it showed the average, guy, besides an officer, which happened to be Dana Andrews. But as far as making a good movie, the Memphis Belle is one that they make about the bombing missions over Europe. They show some good scenes that you see all the time that I have seen before. But the storyline, to me, is a little distorted. Because to begin with, under no circumstances did an enlisted man ever fraternize with an officer. To go to a club on the base where officers are at, there's no enlisted men in there. They're separate. You have an officers club, you have an enlisted men's club. So in that movie, they showed the officers mixing with the other guys, and it never happened.
Well, the other thing that never happens is that in the movies, the planes don't shake. They're perfectly smooth.
Well, actually, the plane won't shake. The only time it shakes is when it goes up and down, But they're pretty smooth. It's not like riding in an airliner as far as that goes. Okay. When you're shooting a machine gun, and you think the plane is going to shake. Well, no. I mean, it shakes a little bit, but it doesn't shake to a point where you see the whole ship is shaking. It's not like a battleship when they shoot a big cannon and the repercussions. It's nothing like that, But it's really smooth sailing. And I mean, to me, it's a joyride. I love to fly. And that's the reason I went and volunteered that I wanted to fly. Because all the guys that went to radio school, they wind up in going to Camp Pinedale to go and learn Japanese code. A few weeks ago, we're talking about, I contacted this one individual that went to radio school with me, and his name was
Darby.
Clarence Darby. And after 50, from 43 to now, it's 57 years. 57 years later, I asked my daughter to, if we could find him, locate him, by his name. I knew he was from San Diego, and she located and got me a phone number. And I'd be damned if I didn't contact him.
Oh, great.
After 57 years, and he remembered me, and we were both 21 years old.
Oh, that's great.
So, it's that kind of thing that, really sets things, in a different tone sometimes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for terrific interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I hope that it meets the expectations of Maggie and the rest of them and what they're trying to accomplish. And if at any time you wish to go ahead and and review anything and contact me, you're free to do so.